Chapter 589. The players waited expectantly until 8 o'clock at night. The server announcement appeared on time. Server announcement. The Decomposer trial has officially begun. Players may click on the participant interface to enter the trial space. The trial duration is 4 hours. Server announcement. The Alchemist trial has officially begun. Players, please click on the participant interface to enter the trial space. The trial will last for 4 hours. With the appearance of the game notification, the players who were already prepared quickly opened the competition interface and chose to enter the trial space. White light began to appear within the underworld city. In just 5 short minutes, the crowded city had almost become an empty city. At that moment, Mo Xiaoxin, who was about to click to enter the trial space, suddenly thought of something and clicked open his friend's panel. He immediately realized that the elementary school Kong E on the wall was not online yet. What's going on? Didn't he say he was going to participate in the trial? Mo Xiaoxin couldn't help but mutter. What's wrong? Almost everyone has left. Why aren't they going in? Don't worry, your biological mother won't laugh at you. Go boldly, I'm mentally prepared, I'm very stable. Mo Lanlan blinked and gave her son a thumbs up to show encouragement when she saw her son standing there in a daze. Mo Xiaoxin rolled his eyes when he heard that. He did not want to say anything else and decisively chose to enter the trial space to avoid being ravaged by his biological mother again. The surroundings gradually became blurry. In the blink of an eye, he found himself at the crown of a giant tree, surrounded by vines that covered an area of about 20 square meters. At the center of the platform, there was a 3-meter-wide table with many tools on it. Just as Mo Xiaoxin was curiously observing his surroundings, the game notification sounded again. Game notification. The trial is about to begin. Please be prepared. The rules of the trial are as follows. The first stage, Grade 1 Spiritual Materials, Treasures, and Spiritual Ores, 3 will be chosen at random. You will get 1 point for each item you decompose. Time limit, 30 minutes. The second stage, Second Grade Spiritual Materials, Treasures, and Spiritual Ores, 3 will be chosen at random. Each item decomposed will be worth 3 points. Time limit, 60 minutes. The third stage, Third Grade Spiritual Materials, Treasures, and Spiritual Ores, 3 will be chosen at random. Every time you decompose one, you will get 10 points. Time limit, 150 minutes. The fourth stage, Fourth Grade Spiritual Materials, Treasures, Spiritual Ores, and Rare Elemental Crystals, 1 piece to be drawn at random. Successful decomposition will result in a reward of 100 points. No time limit. Trial Note 1. Every item's decomposition completion rate reaches 78% and above, and it will be considered a success. Otherwise, it will be considered a failure. If the decomposition rate reaches 100%, the points obtained will be doubled. Trial Note 2. The item to be decomposed at each stage is randomly selected. Players only need to decompose 1 item at each stage to choose to proceed to the next stage. Mo Xiaoxin was a little nervous after the game notification. Although he felt that he should be good at it, and he had received intensive training from the elementary school student hanging on the wall. However, when he thought of his past failures, he was still a little lacking in confidence. After all, it had been 3 years, and he had participated in every single life profession trial. However, the result was that he had gained nothing. As he thought about it, Mo Xiaoxin's mind suddenly recalled his biological mother laughing maniacally when she saw him fail the trial, patting him on the shoulder and saying, "Sure enough, you didn't let her down. He's worthy of being her biological son." How embarrassing and mediocre. At that moment, Mo Xiaoxin suddenly felt a mysterious power being injected into his body. His essence, qi, and spirit were all enhanced. He stepped in front of the console and looked at the 3 tools placed on it. Decomposition Mallet Basic. Item Details. a decomposition mallet forged from soundwave stone, used to decompose and extract elements. Elemental capture gloves, basic. Item details. After decomposing an item, the elements in their unbound state will become very active. This glove can help the decomposer capture the free element. Elemental condensation box, decomposer's exclusive item. Item details. A special item created by an unknown research expert. It can condense captured single elements into elemental crystals and materialize free element. Mo Xiaoxin was not unfamiliar with these three items. After reading the beginner's manual for so many days, he knew that these three items were essential for a beginner decomposer. The mallet was used to decompose, the glove was used to collect the elements that were decomposed, and the box was used to condense the scattered single elements into blocks. These were also the three decomposition processes of a decomposer. For a beginner decomposer, these three items were indispensable, especially the elemental condensation box. The first two items could be replaced by decomposition spell and elemental capture spell, as their abilities increased. However, the path of elemental condensation was extremely difficult and required an extremely high understanding of the spell. This was something that only advanced decomposers needed to learn. For players like them, who hadn't even passed the level of elemental condensation, it was still too early. After looking at the three items, Mo Xiaoxin waited patiently. In the meantime, Mo Xiaoxin opened his friend list again to see if the wall-hanging elementary school student was online. There were less than 10 minutes before the closing of the competition channel. However, the elementary school student who previously said that he wanted to participate in the trial had yet to come online. Could it be that he was overwhelmed by homework? Mo Xiaoxin could not help but speculate. Thinking of this, Mo Xiaoxin sighed. Although he was very jealous of the elementary school student's talent, he had to admit that it was a pity that he did not participate in the trial with such talent. After closing his friend list, he stopped being distracted and focused on waiting for the trial exam to officially begin. What Mo Xiaoxin did not know was that just when he thought that the wall-hanging elementary school student had no chance of participating in the trial exam, a certain elementary school student went through 81 difficulties, and finally relied on shameful wailing, shouting that he wanted to study and improve, and finally entered the game. After entering the game, Kong Yi decisively opened the competition interface and chose to enter the trial space. However, what appeared was the long-awaited anti-addiction notification, and he entered the anti-addiction space as well. At this moment, Kong Yi almost fainted on the spot. In order to make it in time for the life profession exam, he had to start the anti-addiction test at full speed. There were less than 7 minutes left for him. Fortunately, he only needed to pass the anti-addiction test. He did not need to get everything right. After studying seriously, Kong Yi was already so familiar with these questions that it was heartbreaking. In the end, a certain elementary school student entered the alchemist trial venue in the last minute of the countdown. Looking at the gradually blurring scene around him, Kong Yi mumbled, "It's too hard for me." As the competition channel closed, a game notification rang in Mo Xiaoxin's mind. Game notification. The trial has officially begun. Drawing test items for the next stage. Obtained. Cloudy grass, spiritual ingredient, wind thunder sword, precious treasure, star vein stone, spiritual ore. As the game notification rang, 3 items appeared on the table in front of Mo Xiaoxin. Since the trial had already begun, Mo Xiaoxin did not hesitate anymore. He immediately picked up the decomposition mallet on the table and glanced at the 3 random level 1 items. After careful examination, he decisively chose the relatively simple star vein stone as the first item to be decomposed and started working. Similar to demonic chefs, decomposition masters also needed to learn a basic skill, which was spirit eye. It was used to look at the microscopic world inside objects made of spiritual energy. However, the microscopic world that decomposition masters and demonic chefs saw was not exactly the same. One was the combination and arrangement of spiritual energy elements, while the other was the combination of more microscopic elements. They could be said to be completely different, so decomposition masters naturally could not use special knives like demonic chefs. After activating Spirit Eye, a dazzling galaxy formed by countless light spots appeared in the star vein stone in Mo Xiaoxin's eyes. However, the countless light spots in the galaxy did not have a single color. Instead, they were made up of light spots of different colors and shapes. His current task was to decompose these different light spots and gather them into a single elemental crystal for secondary use. This step was extremely complicated and tested the decomposition master's personal ability. After recalling the elemental table recorded in the decomposition master's beginner's handbook, Mo Xiaoxin began to use the decomposition mallet to lightly hit the star vein stone. Using the ripples of vibration conduction, he peeled off the mixed elemental dots and separated them bit by bit. Both were subtle operations, but the biggest difference between decomposition masters and demonic chefs was the method of operation. One used a knife, while the other relied on sound wave. Each sound wave corresponded to an element, and each element could only resonate with sound waves of a fixed frequency. In other words, if decomposition masters wanted to master the method of peeling off all the elements, they had to master the usage of 36,888 sound waves. However, the decomposition master's beginner's handbook that Mo Xiaoxin had learned only recorded 5,000 ways to use sound wave. Although the exam was random, it was mainly based on the contents of the handbook, so Mo Xiaoxin was not worried about encountering elements that were difficult to decompose. As he struck, the blue light spots in the galaxy swayed slightly and began to gather towards the center bit by bit. About 7 minutes later, as a large amount of blue elements gathered into a ball, Mo Xiaoxin suddenly struck the star vein stone with a heavy blow. Immediately, the blue specks of light peeled off from the stone and dissipated, turning into a sparkling blue mist. Seeing this, Mo Xiaoxin hurriedly put on his gloves and waved his hand, sucking the blue mist firmly in his hand. Then, he opened the element condensation box and threw it in. Suddenly, the originally lively star element began to shrink and condense, slowly turning into a crystallized star element the size of a glass ball. Star element, normal element. Element concentration, 103 star element, low. Seeing this, Mo Xiaoxin was overjoyed and immediately began the next step. In the first stage, the elements inside low-level items were very easy to control. Moreover, the item's level was not high, so the degree of adhesion of various elements was not very high, so it was not very difficult to operate. As time passed, one element after another was extracted by Mo Xiaoxin. Star element, earth element, spirit iron element, jade element. Although the star vein stone was only a level 1 spirit ore, it contained more than 50 types of spiritual energy elements. After extracting most of the elements, Mo Xiaoxin confirmed that he had reached the required 78% passing mark. He did not waste any more time and decisively began to decompose the next item. Mo Xiaoxin, who was fully focused, appeared to be particularly serious. He did not have the cheap look that he usually had when scolding the heavens and the earth. Under the pressure of his biological mother, Mo Xiaoxin was ready to prove himself this time. He wanted her to understand that although her biological son did not have much combat talent, he was definitely a genius. He was not a mediocre youth who only knew how to bully others. With this thought, Mo Xiaoxin was immediately filled with fighting spirit. Chapter 590. At this moment, many players were cursing and had a mental breakdown. This was so King cruel that they had met a wall. He could understand why they chose to endure and lay low for the sake of the future. Server-wide announcement. The direction of this cross-border expedition is the Wanderer in the 223, 523 region. Following that, Kong Yi's figure disappeared from where he was and appeared in a vast expanse of white space. Countless strands of blue soul power started to flow into his body. At this moment, the profession trial ended, and the game announcement sounded, announcing the results of the first and second place. The gap between people was vividly displayed at this moment. It was so King Cruel. At this moment, he had already made it to the 18th stage, and the combination of spiritual materials in each stage was 100% perfect, so he received double the points. Looking at this item, Kong Yi's face revealed a nostalgic expression. Many players passed on the news to each other, and a large number of players who had yet to go online began to rush home, using all sorts of reasons to apply for leave just to make it to this epic cross-border expedition. However, at this moment, he could not lend a helping hand at all because he was too weak. I suspect the first place used memory bread, and I used the Men in Black series memory eraser. Gotcha, Flash. Seeing this, Kong Yi glanced at these elemental crystals and was silent for about 5 minutes. Then, his hands began moving again. Server-wide announcement. Players, please get ready. The cross-server expedition will begin in an hour. Please get ready. There were a total of 8,689 elements used to form an item. The requirement was that every element must be added in the fused materials, and there was no specific requirement on the amount of usage. Looking at the constantly increasing score, many players who participated in the alchemy trial were shocked at this moment. He immediately immersed himself in the human order again and began to carefully examine this blurry image. Looking at the clansmen being torn apart by the giant black birds, Kong Yi was filled with anger at this moment. However, as he waited, there was still no reply. Instantly increasing his strength was beyond his understanding. At this moment, he was filled with curiosity about the person behind the scenes, and he really wanted to know who he was. Needless to say, action was the best proof. This news should have come within 8 years of his reincarnation. He could not be sure of the specific year, but it also meant that there was still hope for his clansmen to be saved. While the trial channel was noisy, Kong Yi's expression was incomparably solemn. Bro, you might have been an alchemist in your previous life, that's for sure. Too awesome, we are here to take the exam, and you are here to grind points, laughing emoji. We are both humans. Feeling his increasing strength, Kong Yi was horrified. At this moment, a server announcement resounded across all 5 servers. Take Apothecary for example. The earliest batch of players had long since discovered that there was no end to this field of study. There was too much knowledge to learn, and it had already been perfected into a system. Even the most talented of geniuses wouldn't be able to grasp everything in a few days. Although everything in the trial space was a simulation, Kong Yi had only wanted to give it a try. He never thought that he would actually be able to fuse with his own human token. I don't know who you are, but I know that you must be a member of the human race. You've shed blood and sacrificed yourself. You've never betrayed your clansmen even when they left their homeland and went to the outer realms. Now that they're in trouble, you're not even willing to help them? At the end of the image, a star chart appeared. The power that he had not felt for a long time made him roar into the sky. His childlike body grew little by little, and he turned into a muscular young man with a bare upper body. At this moment they were filled with doubts. If it wasn't for the fact that there were no cheats in Battle Royale, they would have suspected that this player named Kong Yi was using a cheat. After a brief silence, a voice came from the sky. The combination of elements might be difficult for other players, but for Kong Yi, it was as easy as eating and drinking. This was just a simulation space. Kong Yi would never have thought that the human token that was simulated here could receive a message sent from an unknown number of years ago. P.S. Everything in the trial space is created by soul power. However, all the simulated items will eventually return to Lu Wu as soul power, so he can't bring them out. A smile appeared on Lu Wu's face, and he nodded. Since Kong Yi's soul was incomparably huge, the infusion of a large amount of soul power did not affect him much. At this moment, the trial channel was flooded with messages from countless players. Second place, Yi Yimring, 324 points, not to mention rescue. He did not even have the ability to tear the dimension and go to the Outland. Game notification. Are you willing to lead this expedition? If you are determined to lead this expedition, you will hide your name and all the player information. You will appear as an NPC. Meanwhile, in the artifact space, little Bailey, who had already built a portal, turned around and nodded at Lu Wu. However, the feeling of helplessness when he saw this made him very upset. His heart was burning with anger, but he had nowhere to vent it. However, Kong Yi was not in the mood to listen to her, and he seemed to be in a daze. Yes, the trial of an alchemist was different from that of a decomposer. The materials available for them were all kinds of elements, and their task was to use the elements that were randomly obtained to synthesize an item. Seeing this, Kong Yi's expression suddenly changed. Since he had cultivated the Emperor's mirror and promised Bailey to shoulder the burden of the human race, how could he sit back and watch when his people were in trouble? This was his response to Kong Yi. Human token, Kong Yi, 3rd place. Chi Pippi, 297 points. This was the solution that Zhu Shan had sent to him. It could be seen that the situation was very dangerous, but he did not have the ability to rescue them at all. Seeing this item, a trace of nostalgia appeared on Kong Yi's face. He had heard everything that Kong Yi had said to him just now, and he had also checked the distress message from the Outland. However, when it came to the expedition, they thought of the passion and the high reward, and they became excited. At this moment, Kong Yi's face was bleak. It had been half a year, and the expedition was here again. The horn of war was suddenly sounded. How could they not be excited? Under his control, various elemental crystals turned into mist and fused with each other. At this moment, Kong Yi's heart was filled with anxiety. He believed that no matter how big the crisis was, Zhu Shan would be able to hold on for 8 years. Still, no one replied to Kong Yi. Congratulations, you have successfully completed this challenge. You have obtained 30,000 points as a reward. Appraisal complete. We are not playing the same game. I am autistic. While the trial of the decomposer was going on, and the players were competing with each other for first place, on the screen, yellow sand filled the sky, and countless human warriors were chained to stone pillars. Giant black birds soared in the sky, occasionally landing to peck at the chained human warriors, tearing off their flesh and devouring them. As the human ancestor, how could he not care about the plight of his people? However, he did not have any ability at the moment, but he knew that the person behind the scenes definitely had a way. Server-wide announcement. Temporary mission, Interworld Expedition is about to begin. All players, please be prepared and purchase items and consumables in advance. You will not be able to purchase items from the shop after the Interworld Expedition. After checking the patterns, Kong Yi immediately confirmed the other party's identity. I need your help. Hearing the ear-piercing cries of the giant blackbirds, Kong Yi could not help but clench his fists, his eyes filled with anger. Brother, you're too much. You're already first, and you're still farming. Are you trying to anger us to death? That's enough. After a brief silence, Kong Yi spat out 2 words. He quickly exited the human token space, and began to check the source of the news. I failed to merge a level 1 spiritual ore 3 times. When I looked up, the first place was already more than 30,000 points. Did I miss something? Black man ? JPG. Moreover, he had personally participated in the basic construction of many elements fusion, so it was naturally very easy for him. First place, Kong Yi, 31,241 points. Therefore, this player named Kong Yi only took 10 days to learn alchemy to such an extent, which was really unbelievable to them. It was a coordinate, a distress signal from the human ancestor, Zhu Shan. Wind token, human ancestor, Zhu Shan. Every player knew that every life class in the interworld expedition was a field of study that required great concentration. It involved a lot of professional knowledge, and it would take a lot of time to become proficient in it. Comparing oneself to others could really make one angry. Thank you. Since he was able to forge such an artifact, Kong Yi firmly believed that he could do it. After that, he asked Bailey to build the interworld tunnel. Although it cost nearly 100 million soul coins, it was all worth it to Lu Wu. However, Kong Yi did not even pay attention to the trial channel. Instead, he reached out his hand to take the completed horn. Brother Kong Yi, how many do you have? Give me one as well. It's the kind where the points keep increasing after it's activated. Funny? The alchemist trial was a different scene. After waiting for a long time, there was no reply from the white blur. It was also divided into many stages, and each stage was scored according to the quality of the synthesized item. After all, it was too illogical. He did not know why the person behind the scenes was still unwilling to talk to him. However, as the power in his body continued to increase and solidify, Kong Yi suddenly became excited. As more and more elements were added, the outline of the item became clearer. After about 10 minutes of fusion, the item gradually took shape. In just half an hour, Kong Yi had an absolute advantage, leading the second place by almost 100 points. Although he did not have the ability to travel through the void like before, he still felt intoxicated. Time passed bit by bit as they waited. He subconsciously opened the space, mailbox, in the human token. At this moment, he looked up at the sky and murmured, at this moment, a blurry image suddenly appeared in his mind. As for the time, Kong Yi could not guess. To the astonishment of all the participants of the alchemist trial, Kong Yi, who was ranked first, had a sudden increase of 30,000 points. At the same time, a game notification popped up in front of the stunned Kong Yi. After watching it repeatedly, Kong Yi suddenly raised his head and looked at the top of the trial space that was covered by the white blur. The players who were participating in the alchemist trial were completely dumbfounded when they saw the ranking on the top right corner. Please help our people. At this moment, Kong Yi looked like he was begging. Fire pattern holder, Kong Yi ancestor. At this moment, in the alchemist trial space, many players were dumbfounded when they saw the ranking on the top right corner. His gloved hands kept moving, and the elements in front of him kept fusing under his control, turning into new materials. At this moment, the spiritual material of the 19th stage appeared. It was an item in the shape of a horn, and there were many runes engraved on it. The moment it completely formed, a simple and unadorned aura surged. Item details: a human communication token invented by the ancient human emperor Shao Yi. It is used to send messages between humans. Messages sent through this item can cross the barrier of space and be sent to the human token of the other party for storage. Every human token has its own unique pattern used to identify the identity of the sender of the message. Chapter 591. This person sat cross-legged on the 5-colored cloud, surrounded by 10 prayer beads. He was smiling as he looked at Kong Yi and the army of players behind him. At this moment, he flapped his wings and charged towards the army of players. As part of the Calamity Army, they were not afraid of death. From the moment the battle began, they had already decided that only death would stop. From time to time, black crows would descend from the sky, tearing apart their skinny bodies and devouring their remaining flesh and blood. As a result, many figures became badly mutilated, and some even completely disappeared. Looking at the sky full of yellow sand and the completely unfamiliar scene, the players were curious, but at the same time, they felt a deep sense of sorrow. At the center of this heart stood thousands of stone pillars that reached into the sky. At the bottom of each stone pillar was a thin rune chain that bound a figure. Kill! They covered the sky like dark clouds, as if the end of the world had come. As he twisted his body, Kong Yi swung the burning battle axe in his hand. The axe will cut through the barrier of space and suddenly flew towards Dong Huang Tai. When the black clouds covered the sky, the battle was about to begin. Just now, a message was sent to his mind. The black crows in the sky were shot down like raindrops, but the players were still killing mercilessly. In other words, if they died in the battle, they could still be resurrected after the battle. The first cry came from the army of the middle server. Looking across, the mountains and plains were filled with human warriors. It was like a scene from a dream. It was a dream about the revival of the human race. Rune gems flashed, the Avicii demon god descended, green healing energy surrounded the battlefield. Countless figures suddenly rushed forward. After the War of the Three Realms, during the days of escape, they never forgot the humiliation brought by the Heaven Realm, nor did they forget the miserable ending of the human race. This was an incomparably large black crow. From afar, it looked like a mountain. These warriors, whose bodies had long decayed, could not help but let out excited cries. Roar! Especially when they looked at the thousands of stone pillars that reached into the sky, a sense of sorrow came over them. Blood rained down from the sky, nourishing the withered bodies that were chained to the stone pillars. They roared excitedly. How did they vent it? By killing. Victory seemed to have arrived at the same time. Lu Wu and Lil Bailey, who were watching the battle from behind the scenes, turned pale. The cross-border expedition was about to begin. On the ground, a huge formation was slowly outlined. Amidst the rolling black fog, the undead warriors appeared continuously. As the European server players waved their hands, the skeletal warriors raised their weapons toward the sky. This was a scarlet-red planet. It was not very big, not even 1/20th of Earth's size. Looking from the void, there was not a trace of green on the surface of the planet, and it seemed lifeless. At this moment, the players were ready for their first cross-server expedition. The arrival of the players alarmed the countless black crows in the sky. The players had come with the mindset of having fun, but when they saw the bound figures, they were infected by the ancient will in the broken bodies. At this moment, on the planet, sand and dust filled the sky, constantly scouring this desolate world. But at this moment they knew that the passion of killing their enemies with their own hands and spilling their blood did not belong to them, because they were about to rot and decay. Game notification: he has been added as a battle assistance NPC in this battle campaign. At this moment, countless rays of white light soared into the sky from all around the players. They solidified and gradually turned into an unbreakable barrier. As the scarlet-red axe intent advanced, it was constantly weakened. By the time it reached Dong Huang Tai, there was only a gust of wind left, blowing his long hair. After the dust settled, countless figures appeared in front of the human warriors. At this moment, Kong Yi's expression changed. They had the same bloodline inheritance, and they were all humans. After experiencing the ravages of wind and sun, the figures tied to the stone pillars were shriveled and looked miserable. I lost to you in the battle of the Three Realms. I admit that you are stronger than me, but your incarnation is not enough. Whoosh! With a long cry, it quickly flapped its wings, trying to dodge the attack. At this moment, an incomparably huge figure rose from the horizon. As it spread its wings, sand and dust filled the sky, and a long cry resounded through the desolate world. Cross-world mission. Rescue the humans imprisoned on the wandering planet. Please be careful of the Black Raven army that is lying in ambush on this planet. They were no strangers to this figure. He was the pioneer of the human race, and also the human general who led them to fight against the enemy. During this period, Lu Wu was constantly investigating the situation on the wandering planet, preparing for the arrival of the players. Seeing this figure, the faces of those human warriors who were chained on the stone pillars became incomparably excited. Rescuing the human warriors was originally a mission in the game. The ancestor of the human race, Kong Yi. Hundreds of millions of players arrived at this moment. Facing the enemy, they unleashed their absolute combat power. At this moment, the prayer beads in Dong Huangtai's hand rotated again, and the space shook violently. "I will bring you all home." Kong Yi turned his head to look at the figures tied to the stone pillars, and made a promise. Then, he faced the black figure that blotted out the sky and the sun. A large number of players who received the message from their friends rushed home, or found a game room to enter the battle. Countless genetic warriors in the Asia server transformed their bodies. Their bodies bulged as if they were inflated, and their solid muscles symbolized absolute strength. They were also ready for a fierce battle. It was not that he was a warmonger, but that he was only fighting for his people. The purpose of killing was so that the younger generation of the human race would not have to kill anymore. Anger arose spontaneously. The steel torrent of the technology army lifted up their cannons and muzzles, aiming at the dark clouds in the sky. However, they were horrified to find that they could not move at all. With fiery red hair and a crimson battle axe in his hand, he exuded a domineering aura. "It's enough to kill you." As he spoke, Kong Yi strode toward the East Emperor Tai. During this period, all kinds of excuses for taking leave emerged one after another. Countless shadows of totem beasts materialized in the air, and ancient totem stone pillars suddenly descended. In an instant, tens of thousands of beasts roared and roared at the sky. At this moment, there were less than 100 people left alive. "You are not the East Emperor Tai." After a brief moment of shock, Kong Yi pointed his axe at the figure and said in a deep voice. As he spoke, he took a step forward and, like a giant shield, he stood in front of the players. However, they did not have the right to choose death. The runic chains had sealed all the power in their bodies, and they did not even have the power to struggle. Even if they were alive, it was a fate worse than death. The immortal of the human race. Crimson flames and battle intent rose as Kong Yi strode toward the East Emperor Tai with determined steps. Looking at the smiling East Emperor Tai, Kong Yi clenched the battle axe in his hand. Although it was lamentable to bury their corpses in a foreign land, the most lamentable thing was that they would not be able to witness the revival of the human race. At this moment, a figure leaped out from the group of players, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a giant that could hold up the sky. "Kong Yi, aren't you dead? How did you do it? How did you create such a large-scale human army in such a short period of time?" Dong Huangtai said with a smile. However, if their souls were scattered in this distant foreign land after they died, it would be difficult for these players' souls to return to the 6 paths of reincarnation. During this period, the number of online players in the battle continued to increase. This was the connection from the bloodline, and it was also the inheritance of the ancient will. Although they could still observe the battle with the artifact, they could not summon the players back due to the distance. Roar! Lil Bailey immediately took over the control of the artifact and began burning soul coins to strengthen the channel between worlds. She wanted to establish contact with the players again. At this moment, they felt that they were hallucinating. It was said that before people died, they would see the scene that they longed to see the most. The battle axe in his hand burned with crimson flames, and the battle intent that he had not felt for a long time burned in his chest. At this moment, the players had no idea that a huge crisis had occurred. They instinctively wanted to follow this figure and move forward, but a crimson barrier appeared behind Kong Yi, blocking all the figures that wanted to move forward. At this moment, East Emperor Tai looked at Kong Yi and said, "You've become weaker." This was because they did not want to see any of their clansmen die for them, who were about to decay. This was the pioneer of the human race, the power that belonged to the human race. Upon hearing this, East Emperor Tai turned his wrist, and a prayer bead floated in the palm of his left hand. With a light flick, the surrounding space shook violently and became extremely unstable. Black spatial cracks appeared continuously. Sand and dust rolled up to a height of 1,000 meters, obscuring their vision. They struggled to breathe. At this moment, They were like locusts descending on the army of players that suddenly appeared. Outside the glaring white barrier, a figure penetrated through the white light and arrived. After a short contact, they were defeated. Even the players themselves did not know why they were angry. This anger came from the feedback in their bloodline. It was as if every drop of blood in their bodies, or even every cell, was reacting with anger. The flames ignited his body, and Kong Yi suddenly swung his battle axe forward. With a swing of the axe, the crimson flames tore through the space and pulled out a black crack. Endless killing intent locked onto the Crow King. The sudden change caught them off guard. The Crow King, the king of their race, was killed in the first contact. How could they fight against the Calamity army that appeared out of nowhere? They had hoped that their clansmen would come to their rescue, but now they did not want any of their clansmen to come. For some reason, the unyielding will of the figures bound to the stone pillars made the players feel endless rage. With just one swing of the axe, the seemingly invincible Crow King was cut into two. This let him know a piece of bad news. The artifact that was closely connected to the players had been isolated. At this moment, the person behind the scenes was using soul power to repair it. At this moment, the Crow King felt that his body had become extremely sticky. He looked down and saw that the thing that was restricting his movements was the materialized blood-red killing intent. They were sincerely proud of this. Thinking of this, Kong Yi gripped the battle axe tightly and said with a serious expression, without needing the game's notification, the players already knew who the enemy was in this battle. At this moment, in the battle below, the dark clouds had dispersed. All the black crows were like frightened birds, spreading their wings and floating in the air, not daring to attack again. East Emperor Tai nodded. I am his incarnation. I stayed here to set up this trap just to wait for you guys. My original intention was to capture Xiaohao, who was still escaping, but I did not expect that the one here would be you, who I thought was already dead. Moreover, you actually brought such a large human army with you. This is really a surprise. The sandstorm blinded their eyes. They quietly waited for the arrival of death. Just like that, day after day, they forgot about time. The only thing they remembered was the obsession of reviving the human race. As the two forces collided, the players advanced with absolute dominance. A large number of black crows were shot down, and countless figures waved their sharp blades and cast spells in the rain of blood. This was because even they were blocked out by this barrier. From the game's notification, they knew that after this cross-world expedition started, they would not be able to open the shop. Therefore, every player bought a large number of potions and made preparations. In the first battle outside the territory, the Calamity army had displayed astonishing power. Chapter 592. Before the players landed on the Wandering Star, Lu Wu had carefully investigated the planet. Little did he know that Dong Huang Tai's incarnation had been lying in ambush for years, waiting for the human warriors who had escaped from the outer region to rescue their people. At this moment, the players were caught in an unprecedented crisis. The players used to be proud of their ability to resurrect and fight again like a perpetual motion machine. However, at this moment, facing the enchantment that Dong Huang Tai's incarnation had meticulously set up, even the artifact was temporarily isolated. It could not pass through the enchantment and connect all the players at once. Although he could take away 100,000 players at once, there were hundreds of millions of players. Even Lu Wu could do nothing. At this moment, Bailey was constantly burning the soul coins in her storage to strengthen the connection between the artifact and the players. She was burning with anxiety and wanted to save the people as soon as possible. However, the crisis had arrived. At this moment, Kong Yi stood up. He had been through many ups and downs, but he was still the ancestor of humanity. This was not a title. He needed to be the backbone of the human race and shoulder the heavy responsibility of protecting the human race. This time, he chose to continue to protect the human race and buy time for Lu Wu. The fiery red constantly collided with the world shrouded in five-colored brilliance. The players felt inexplicably heavy when they saw this scene. They wanted to join the battle and fight the enemy with this NPC, but the crimson enchantment stopped them from moving forward. Facing Dong Huang Tai's incarnation, Kong Yi, who had not fully recovered, knew that it would be difficult for him to win. However, he did not step back. Behind him was the future hope of the human race and the only remaining flame of revival for the human race. How could he retreat? Roar! The burning battle-axe split the brilliance and struck the defensive layer formed by the 3 prayer beads on the surface of the Donghuang's incarnation. The prayer beads shook violently, but Kong Yi held on to the battle-axe tightly, clenching his teeth. He did not let go even though his internal organs were in pain from the shock. Kong Yi, how about submitting to the heavenly realm? There are still human descendants in the heavenly realm. Becoming their leader is not a bad choice. Roar. Traitors are not fit to be called humans. They are already the dogs of the heavenly realm. Do you want me to be the Dog King? Don't humiliate me. As he spoke, Kong Yi lowered his arm to suppress the violent shaking of the prayer beads. Seeing that Kong Yi was still the same as before, without any thoughts of belonging, Dong Huang Tai sighed. With a wave of his hand, the remaining 7 prayer beads around him separated and flew behind Kong Yi toward the blood-red barrier that prevented players from advancing. Dong Huang. Seeing this, Kong Yi's eyes almost popped out of their sockets, and he immediately turned to pounce on the 7 prayer bead. Because he knew that the players were the hope and future of the human race, he could not stand by and watch as they were killed by Dong Huang. Seeing Kong Yi pouncing over, Dong Huang's incarnation revealed a smile and flicked his finger. Immediately, the 7 beads suddenly linked together and transformed into a 7-star sword that suddenly turned around and pierced towards Kong Yi's neck. Puff! Blood splattered everywhere. Kong Yi's head flew high into the air. This order caught Kong Yi off guard, and his neck was pierced by the sharp, 7-star sword and severed. Seeing this scene, the players roared in anger. Their hearts couldn't stop trembling. They didn't want to watch others fight for them. They wanted to kill and fight together. The figures that were chained to the stone pillars also roared in grief and indignation. The one who was fighting was their pioneer, their general, and also the guardian of the human race. However, the smile on Donghuang's face quickly froze. Even without a head, the figure was still standing there like a towering mountain, not moving in the slightest. The crimson battle axe was still burning fiercely. As he waved it, it fiercely struck one of the prayer beads. This attack also caught Dong Huang off guard. Crack! The 7-star sword dissipated, and the leading prayer bead shattered into countless crystals and drifted away. Kong Yi didn't stop, and the second axe followed closely. Crack! The second prayer bead shattered. So what if I lost my head? I am the ancestor of the human race, the guardian of the human race. Even death cannot erase the mark on my body. Xing Tian Wu Ganqi, fierce will always be there. The battle axe in Kong Yi's hand once again ignited with raging flames, and it shattered the 3rd prayer bead. At this moment, Dong Huang Tai's incarnation was stunned. Roar! Even without a head, Dong Huang Tai seemed to hear Kong Yi roaring at the sky. His unyielding fighting spirit didn't disappear with the loss of his head. Instead, it became even more resolute, just like the figure standing there. At this moment, the spirit of the human ancestor, Kong Yi, infected all the players present. Roar! The players couldn't help but roar at the sky along with this soundless roar. The human warriors who were imprisoned screamed hysterically as well. In their minds, many human warriors who had fought bloody battles but were eventually buried in the river of history appeared. Even though their bodies were broken, they yearned for power. They yearned to fight alongside the human ancestor. Even if it was only for a short second, the glory of that second was equivalent to eternity in their hearts. Looking at Kong Yi, who still had absolute fighting power, the smile on Dong Huang's incarnation's face finally disappeared, and he became extremely gloomy. He reached out and controlled the 3 prayer beads around him. 2 of them shot towards Kong Yi, and the other 4 gathered around him. They began to spin rapidly around Kong Yi, continuously tearing space cracks, trying to trap him. Kong Yi, who had lost his head, began to wave his battle axe, trying to break through the seal. However, he couldn't break through the seal formed by the 6th prayer bead. At this moment, the last prayer bead flew towards the players again under Dong Wang Tai's control. As it approached the blood-red barrier, it dispersed into countless white light figures and began to bombard the barrier. For Dong Wang, Kong Yi couldn't be left alive, but the descendants of the human race couldn't be left alive either, because the human race had unlimited potential. With so many human warriors left in the outworld, the day of their comeback would come in the future. By then, there might be more Kong Yis, or even a new human emperor. He wanted to strangle the human race so that they would never be able to rise again. Seeing this, the figures imprisoned on the stone pillars yearned for more power. They were willing to sacrifice their lives to protect these descendants. However, their bodies were already rotten. How could they obtain power? At this moment, a voice rang in their minds. It was Lu Wu's voice. At this moment, Bailey had strengthened the space tunnel. Although Lu Wu could mobilize his soul power, he still couldn't send the players back in one go. At this moment, the crisis had already arrived. Therefore, he asked these human warriors a question. Are you willing to burn your last flame of life to protect the future of the human race? Their answers were unanimous. Fight! A huge amount of soul power was injected into the bodies of these warriors through the tunnel. Although the soul power couldn't take all the players away at once, it ignited the fighting spirit of these ancient warriors. The huge amount of power that filled their bodies gave them the ability to fight again. At this moment, they roared and broke free from the rune chains, pouncing towards the white light figures that broke through the blood-red barrier. This battle wasn't over yet. They didn't have a soul as strong as Kong Yi's. The continuous injection of soul power had pushed their already broken souls to the brink of collapse. However, they were extremely excited because this was what they wanted. At this moment, more than 100 decaying bodies collided with the white light figures in the sky, turning them into specks of starlight, forming a new barrier that blocked the attack of the light figures and repelled them. When the players saw this, they roared and wanted to rush forward. At this moment, the blood-red barrier had been broken, but a new barrier suddenly appeared, blocking the players' way again. This time, it was the barrier that was set up by the 100 old soldiers. Why? A player at the front roared angrily at the old soldiers. At this moment, a white-haired old man with a broken body suddenly turned to the players and smiled. He pointed at the player in front of him and said, "Tell me, what's your occupation?" The player who was pointed at immediately said, "Player?" The old man shook his head and said again, "Tell me, what's your occupation?" The player who was pointed at immediately said, "Player?" The old man shook his head and said again, "True occupation, teacher." For some reason, that player blurted out his occupation in real life. "What about you?" The old man pointed at another person and asked, "Student." "What about you?" "Accountant." The old soldier smiled and shook his head. Then, he turned to the front and roared, "Old friends, tell the juniors what our occupation is." Roar. Warriors. There were only 100 of them, but they gathered an indomitable fighting spirit that could defeat millions of lions. This was their answer, and also the reason why they didn't let these juniors participate in the battle. Looking at the countless light figures converging in front of them, the ancient human warriors all revealed excited expressions. They condensed spears in their hands and waited for the moment the enemies approached. At this moment they would be the sturdiest shield for the players at the back, using their lives to form a line of defense. Old friends, remember this moment. It will accompany you on your final journey until the end. The old man with a broken body said as he took a step forward and led the human warriors into the sky, facing the starlight that filled the sky. The old man roared angrily, and the 100 or so people immediately shouted in unison, "Immortal humans!" At this moment, a horn fell from the sky and landed in front of the barrier. After the players analyzed it, they discovered that the old man's name was Zhu Shan. Human Ancestor Zhu Shan. Chapter 593. Outer Realm, Rogue Planet. Looking at the human warriors who had recovered their strength and broken free from the runic chains, Dong Huang's avatar was filled with indescribable shock. After the Battle of the Three Realms, in order to prevent humans from rising in the Outer Realm, Dong Huang's main body had chosen to leave the Three Realms and continue his pursuit. During this period, his main body had first killed human ancestor Kong Yi. After confirming that his soul had dissipated, he had targeted human ancestor Zhu Shan, who was also fleeing, and captured him and all his clansmen. However, his main body hadn't directly killed Zhu Shan. This was because he hadn't been able to find any traces of the last human ancestor, Xiaohao. Thus, he had set up a trap to lure Xiaohao over. It was also at that time that he had left his avatar to lie in ambush and set up a sealing barrier. His goal was to kill all the human warriors who had escaped into the Outer Realm. However, the avatar hadn't met human ancestor Xiaohao. Instead, it had met human ancestor Kong Yi, who he had thought had dissipated long ago. What surprised him even more was that the over 100 human warriors who served as bait and were chained to the stone pillars had broken free from their seals and regained their unparalleled fighting strength. Back then, he had personally seen these human warriors on their last breath. Their bodies had been torn apart by the black crows, and their souls had been on the brink of collapse under the harsh weather. How had he done it? He subconsciously turned to look at Kong Yi, who was still brimming with battle intent despite having lost his head. Then, he looked at Zhu Shan, who was leading the charge. Zhu Shan's body was so battered that it looked like it would collapse at any moment. Finally, he looked at the players who had been stopped behind the barrier. Dong Huang's avatar's expression gradually turned resolute. He extended his hand and began controlling the light figures, formed by the prayer beads to fight Zhu Shan and the others. Humans couldn't be left alive. At that moment, he wanted to break through this line of defense and kill all the future humans. Under the personal control of Dong Huang's avatar, the hundreds of light figures formed by the prayer beads had strength comparable to immortals. They formed a starlight formation, and like the sharpest spears, they charged towards the supposedly decaying warriors. At that moment, the hundreds of spears pointed at the sky filled with light figures. His face was expressionless, and his messy hair fluttered in the wind. However, his eyes revealed endless battle intent. They formed an unshakable line of defense to protect the human descendants behind them, as well as the future and hope of the human race. As the light figures approached, Zhu Shan roared, "Kill!" The 100 people roared in unison. They lowered their bodies and waved their spears at the same time, their battle intent soaring. In the face of death, they weren't afraid. It was because they saw the future of the human race, and even more so saw countless juniors with great potential. Right now, they no longer had any regret. What they needed to do now was to protect the future and preserve this spark that could start a prairie fire in the future. They would never take a step back. This was the promise they made to the countless human descendants behind them. Just as Zhu Shan had said, they were warriors, and dying in battle was the fate of warriors. At this moment, no matter how dazzling the starlight filled the sky, the line of defense forged by their flesh and blood did not budge. Seeing this, Dong Huang's clone's expression turned extremely gloomy. At this moment, 3 of the prayer beads had shattered, and the remaining 6 were blocking Kong Yi's attempt to break out of the encirclement. The remaining 1 could be controlled, but it was unable to break through the ancient warrior's defense line and kill the future of the human race. The human race was a powerful force of the past. However, the human race had displayed tenacious combat power, making him feel troubled. Everything had exceeded his expectations. After thinking for a while, he decisively took out another thought. He turned into a light figure and charged at the players. The pressure was reduced. Kong Yi, who had lost his head, increased the power of his axe. He kept attacking the boundary formed by the thought. At this moment, Donghuang's clone could no longer sit still. He finally stood up and flew toward Kong Yi. The boundary's power was mobilized and surged into Donghuang's clone. He formed a seal with one hand and the lightning seal formed. The dark clouds in the sky surged, and with a loud boom, a thick bolt of lightning smashed down from the sky, blasting Kong Yi's body. Blood splattered and flowed down his body. Kong Yi didn't stop swinging his axe. Protecting the human race was a mission that had been imprinted in his soul. It had been so in the past, and it hadn't changed now. Boom! The burning axe seemed to be roaring, and the boundary formed by the thought beads shook violently. Seeing this, Donghuang's clone made another hand seal. Several bolts of lightning struck down and struck Kong Yi's body. He had never doubted Kong Yi's strength. Back then, even though the human emperor had disappeared, the 8 human ancestors had joined forces to severely injure the other celestial emperor, Taishang. In fact, what shocked him the most was Kong Yi's tenacity. He had been like this since the Battle of the Three Realms. He had dragged his heavily injured body and led his clansmen to the outer realm. He would rather die than surrender. Later, when he was being hunted by his main body, he had never compromised. Even though the road ahead had been bumpy, he had never thought of giving up. However, just when he thought that Kong Yi had become a thing of the past, he had actually returned. He was as tenacious as ever, unwilling to compromise. His determination was as strong as ever. The hardships hadn't smoothed out his edges. He was still the same Kong Yi. Even though his combat power was no longer as strong as before, his spirit had never changed. Under the attack of the lightning, Kong Yi's body trembled. Blood flowed down like sweat. The power attacking the boundary became weaker and weaker. Seeing this, Donghuang Tai smiled again. "So what if you're strong? You're still exhausted." At that moment, he suddenly turned his head and looked into the distance, at the area where the players were. Flames. Flames that blotted out the sky dyed half the sky red and stung the eyes. At that moment, the bodies of the human ancient warriors were burning. Their physical bodies were slowly devoured by the flames, revealing their solid blue souls. Facing the light and shadow battle formed by the 2 prayer beads, the human ancient warriors decisively abandoned their physical bodies and burned their souls. When the flames faded, many young figures appeared in the sky above the battlefield. They raised their spears in high spirits. It was as if they were in the prosperous era of the human race. "Old friends, I bid you farewell here. May the human race continue to prosper." Zhu Shan, who was in the lead, turned to look at his comrades. After abandoning their physical bodies, these old friends became extremely young in Zhu Shan's eyes. They looked exactly the same as he remembered when they were young. That was an era that he couldn't return to. It was also a time when the human race had flourished. Back then, they represented the new generation and future of the human race. However, the future was behind them now, and they were just a group of elders who were about to decay. All they could do was to burn their last bit of strength and protect them until the end of their lives. Roar! Hundreds of spears were raised and slammed down, creating ripples in the air. The price of burning their souls was to disappear forever. However, none of them regretted it. Instead, they smiled. When the light and shadow battle arrived, the human ancient warriors under the blue soul soared into the sky and faced them head-on. In the battle, Zhu Shan's soul was penetrated by the light and shadow again and again, becoming thinner and thinner. However, he still rushed to the front. Because he was the human ancestor. It wasn't a name, but a mission and a heavy burden. When the starlight gathered and his soul was completely torn apart, Zhu Shan roared his last cry in this world. "The human race is immortal!" Roar! More than 100 ancient warriors shouted in unison and respectfully sent off this forerunner of the human ancestor race. Then, they once again threw themselves into the battle. This scene deeply shocked the players and Lu Wu, who was behind the scenes. Back then, North Sea was the same. She chose to fight against the heavens for him and helped him escape the crisis of the god's seal. Later on, the great emperor of Dong Yu chose to bear the consequences of his mistake and paid the price of a law. At this moment, these human ancient warriors were the same. Even if they were to burn their souls, they would protect the descendants of the human race. Along the way, Lu Wu realized that although he was carrying a heavy burden, there were many strangers who used their lives as light to illuminate his path. It turned out that he wasn't alone on this path. Other than Bailey, he didn't have anyone to rely on. In fact, he just didn't notice the followers hiding in the dark. They had always been there, however. At every critical moment, there would always be someone who would walk out from the darkness and choose to accompany him with their lives. Seeing these human ancient warriors burning their souls and choosing this battle method, the East Emperor's incarnation was stunned. At this moment, Kong Yi's body, which was sealed, started burning. Like the human ancient warriors, he was exhausted and chose to burn his soul in exchange for the last bit of strength. Although he had lost his head, Kong Yi still remembered what he said before. He said to the ancient warriors, "I'll bring you home." Now, he went back on his words and did not do what he said. The continuous fall of the ancient warriors made Kong Yi's heart ache. However, he didn't choose to give up. He used to be a player, so he knew that the future of the players was the future of the human race. As long as they were alive, the golden age of the human race would eventually arrive. Therefore, he couldn't go back on his words this time. In order to protect the players, he chose to burn himself like the ancient warriors. His blood was boiling in the flames, and his body was being eaten by the flames bit by bit. Then, a blue soul emerged. The flames on the battle axe turned blue at this moment. As Kong Yi waved it, a dazzling blue light burst out. Boom! A crack appeared on the crystal formed by the prayer beads, and it started to spread in all directions. At this moment, the seal, which had withstood countless slashes, could no longer bear the burden. Under the disbelieving gaze of the East Emperor's incarnation, Kong Yi, who had lost his body, broke through the seal and attacked. The world in front of him was instantly engulfed in blue flames. The East Emperor's incarnation struggled violently, but his headless body held him tightly. With a roar, the blue flames shot up into the sky. The violent explosion shook the earth. At this moment, the outer seal lost control and suddenly shattered. Lu Wu, who was behind the scenes, also sensed the existence of all the players. He silently kept all the players, including the souls of the players who had died in the battle against the Black Raven army, into his artifact. Then, he turned his head to look at the center of the explosion. At this moment, a figure climbed up from the deep pit, trembling. He looked extremely pathetic. He turned to look at the devastation around him, but he still had a smile on his face. Since Kong Yi and the ancient warriors were dead, it was time to kill the younger generation of the human race. Although the process was extremely arduous, he still won in the end. However, when he raised his head, he saw a figure floating above his head, staring at him coldly. He was very familiar with the aura that this person exuded, and he couldn't help but shiver. "The Emperor!" The East Emperor's incarnation cried out. This was a completely unfamiliar and young figure. He had never seen him before, but the aura he exuded was unique to the Emperor. Fear emerged from the bottom of his heart. Although he was only the incarnation of the East Emperor and not his real body, he still had his own feelings and emotions. He was genuinely afraid of the Emperor, who once stood at the peak of power in the Three Realms. Chapter 594. You'll be the one to die, and I'll lead the humans to destroy the heavenly realm. They were about to die, so this humiliation was nothing. It felt so good to destroy the future of the human race. When the ancient human warriors died, they were filled with anger and sorrow for some reason. Had the human race forces in the Outland developed to such a scale? According to Bailey, he had to walk this path, and no one else could. But she never explained why. Thinking of this, he panicked and lost the desire to fight. He turned around, turned into a white light, and shot into the sky. This time, little Kong Yi did not have that heavy memory, nor did he have to carry the mission of reviving the human race. However, this person had the aura of a human emperor, which made him suspect that this was a newly born human emperor. Roar! At this moment, sensing his power, this powerful prayer bead was about to destroy this planet. This was the backup plan left by the incarnation of the Donghuang, the last step of the original body's instruction. Lu Wu understood and hated himself for being useless. He felt that he was not worthy of such a heavy responsibility. At this moment, in the forum of the 5 servers, the players were having a heated discussion about today's expedition mission. He struggled to stand up and scanned his surroundings, but he could not find Lu Wu. At this moment, Papa Kong could not help but shake his head. For some reason, he felt that Kong Yi had changed. He seemed to have become more like a child. Although he did not know the truth, he chose to believe in Lil Bailey. This spirit would be inherited. In such a doomsday scene, Lu Wu slapped the face of the incarnation of the Donghuang. The shadow of the divine beast Bian appeared behind Lu Wu and carried him to the figure that had fallen to the ground. Seeing that the indicator light on the gaming chamber was still on, Papa Kong sighed and pressed the button of the gaming chamber. The pair of eyes that were observing everything in the dark slowly dissipated at this moment. Looking at the crazed face of the incarnation of the Donghuang, Lu Wu grabbed his neck and lifted him up bit by bit. "I made breakfast for you. Go eat it, it's time for school." "What's wrong?" Papa Kong was a little surprised. But at this moment, Lu Wu's heart was undoubtedly in pain. Perhaps in Papa Kong's eyes, this was the child he wanted. Lu Wu did not speak. He walked toward the incarnation of the Donghuang, his clenched fist still stained with blood. Looking at the figure floating above his head, the Donghuang clone's face was filled with fear. Boom! The Donghuang incarnation smashed a deep pit into the ground. Lu Wu arrived at the same time, and his fists rained down on the Donghuang incarnation's face. "Let's move on." There were laughter, sadness, and despair along the way, but Lu Wu had learned a spirit from his ancestors. Xing Tian's dance of Ganqi, his ferocious will remain. Kong Yi rubbed his head and stood up. He turned to look at his father, and a sweet smile suddenly appeared on his face. He stood up and threw himself into his father's arms. "Are you afraid?" That person sneered, but his eyes were filled with anger. As the older generation of the human race, they protected their descendants until the very last moment of their lives. Ahem, so you only have the aura of a human sovereign, but you don't have the strength of a human sovereign. I was wrong. After landing on the ground, the clone of the East Emperor staggered to his feet with a bloody face. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and looked at Lu Wu with a smile on his face. It was also because of him that the Ice Ghost Legion, which was loyal to his previous life, had fallen. Even if he was just a clone, he was still hated. If Xiaohao was so strong that he could not defeat him, then he would die with him. At the moment of his death, the smile on his face disappeared, and all that was left was the fear of dying with a grievance. As he waited, the door of the gaming chamber opened slowly. Since he was going to die anyway, then he would let this human sovereign die with him. Feeling the pain on his cheek, the clone of the East Emperor wanted to be angry, but when he thought that this human sovereign was going to die with him, he chose to laugh instead. "I miss you!" Little Kong Yi rubbed himself in his father's arms, then raised his head and looked into his father's eyes. Keep fighting, keep fighting. Do you want to run? You don't have a chance anymore. Die with me with the destruction of this planet. You have no choice." The fallen Donghuang incarnation laughed hysterically. In order to protect the players, they chose to burn their souls. Although Lil Bailey had the ability to repair the soul fragments, their souls had long been burnt to ashes, and nothing was left. He did not understand why. It was obvious that any one of them could do better than him, so why did he have to bear this responsibility? He did not want to take this step unless it was absolutely necessary. But at this moment, he had no other choice, because he no longer had the strength to fight this weak human sovereign in front of him. He even realized that the human army on the other side of the barrier had disappeared. This cross-border battle had deeply shocked them. When Kong Yi burned his soul and chose to sacrifice himself, he entrusted a request to Lu Wu. Blood splattered everywhere, but Lu Wu was completely in a state of madness. He kept hammering the face of the clone of the East Emperor until it was a bloody mess. Fists filled with rage smashed madly on that hateful face at this moment. But even so, no one knew that the player who was at the top of the alchemist ranking leaderboard would never appear again. No matter how difficult the road ahead was, he would never give up. During breakfast, Kong Yi, who was usually quiet, took the initiative to talk to his father. He even patted his chest and promised that he would study hard and get first place in class every time, which made his father laugh happily. At this moment, Lu Wu suddenly threw him to the ground. His appearance was like a flash in the pan, blooming only for a short while. However, the clone of the East Emperor was laughing maniacally. Just like the players who did not know the truth, he would tell the players the truth sooner or later. Speaking of which, it was still worth it. After all, he was just a clone. While the other party had the potential to become a human sovereign, Lu Wu did as he was told. "You are the one who will die, not me. I really don't know where you get your confidence from. Pathetic clone, stay here and accompany the ancient warriors of the human race," Lu Wu said as he looked at the clone of the East Emperor with a pitiful gaze. Then, he disappeared with the wind. However, Kong Yi's sacrifice just now had seriously injured him. He could not fly fast with his injured body, let alone break through the space barrier and head to the outskirts. Hearing this, Father Kong smiled and rubbed little Kong Yi's head. Along the way, Lu Wu had always felt that he was useless and useless. However, there were still powerhouses who stood in front of him and became his protectors. Some of them even sacrificed their lives for him. The clone of the East Emperor, who obeyed the orders of the main body, spent a lot of effort to set up the barrier. At the same time, he also left behind a prayer bead, bestowed by the main body inside the planet. What made him feel worse was that all the prayer beads were destroyed in the explosion. His strongest source of power was gone. The death of Kong Yi and the ancient warriors of the human race could no longer be salvaged. Hearing this, Lu Wu smiled and rubbed little Bei Li's head, nodding his head. A long night had passed. Realizing that his son had not woken up yet, Father Kong could not help but go to Kong Yi's room. Lu Wu did not answer. Instead, he slapped Kong Yi's face. While Kong Yi was still in shock, Lu Wu slapped him again. While Kong Yi was still in shock, Lu Wu's figure suddenly appeared beside him. Lu Wu grabbed Kong Yi's neck and flung him to the ground. He used Kong Yi's memories to create a new him because his father could not live without him. Slap, slap, slap. Who are you? The new emperor. The clone of the East Emperor was sure that the main body did not give him any memory of this person. At this moment, the ground was collapsing and sinking rapidly. Lava flowed and spewed freely. The wandering planet became extremely unstable, as if it would explode at any time. What right did he have to make these seniors sacrifice their lives just to protect his secret or him? It's a pity that I have to die here with you. Although I'm just a clone, I once thought about my own future. What a pity! Looking at Lu Wu, who was standing in front of him, the clone of the East Emperor sneered. As the sky fell and the earth cracked, the lava swallowed his body. However, he still did not understand why this was happening. In the past, Kong Yi was not very close to him. He was a little too mature. He was not like an 8-year-old primary school student, who was always thinking about things with a bitter and vengeful attitude. Now, he was just an ordinary 8-year-old child. He would also be a good child in his father's eyes, accompanying him for the rest of his life. Therefore, the current Kong-yi made him feel a little different. Did you know that in order to lure Xiaohao here and make him stay here, I had a backup plan? I didn't expect to use it on you. But it's worth it. You have the aura of the Emperor, and your potential is even more terrifying than Xiaohao's. As he spoke, the clone of the East Emperor stomped on the ground lightly, and a surge of power instantly seeped into the ground. The spirit that Kong-yi displayed before his death was the legacy that he left for Lu Wu and the players. Especially after seeing Kong-yi and the human ancient warriors die in battle, the anger that was buried in Lu Wu's heart finally erupted. He had to inform the main body of this news. A new emperor had been born, and the crisis of the Heaven Realm was coming. At this moment, the ground suddenly began to crack, and lava continuously spewed out from it. All right. Kong-yi crawled out of his father's arms and ran down the stairs. No matter how much he vented, he would still die here with Lu Wu. How is this possible? How is this possible? I don't believe it. After returning to the artifact space, Lil Bailey quickly came to Lu Wu's side. She seemed to want to comfort him, but she didn't know what to say. The tremors continued to intensify, and the world seemed to be ushering in the end. The wind howled and lightning flashed. Lu Wu roared and bombarded the clone of the East Emperor with his fists. In the end, he grabbed the clone by the neck and lifted him up. Then, he punched the clone in the chest and sent him flying. Believe in yourself. You are still growing and you can't be replaced. Only you can do the last step. He was the ancestor of the human race, and he lived up to his name. Ha ha, do you think you can escape? This world is already collapsing, and you won't be able to escape with your strength. Stay with me. With your company, I won't be lonely. The clone of the East Emperor laughed hysterically, and he looked at Lu Wu with eyes full of madness. However, even after losing his head, he still wielded the battle axe resolutely. This image remained in the players' hearts, and it could not be erased. At this moment, the clone of the East Emperor, who was still laughing hysterically, was stunned. Chapter 595. Early the next morning, after making breakfast for Bailey, Lu Wu entered the artifact space and began to read the information that Bailey had compiled for him, learning about the artifact. After the cross-border battle yesterday, Lu Wu also discovered some of the hidden dangers of the artifact. The long-distance teleportation of the player legion across worlds would cause the connection between the artifact and the players to become unbreakable. Although the East Emperor's clone had spent several years to set up that barrier, it was impossible to break it. Lu Wu thought that the artifact's ability was almost unsolvable, so the unexpected situation was beyond his expectations. He asked Lil Bailey about it, and Lil Bailey gave him an explanation. The reason was simple, it had to do with distance. The main body of the artifact was a ring in Lu Wu's hand, and the artifact space was actually hidden beside Lu Wu, more like a parallel space that he carried with him. The area of absolute safety that the artifact space could cover was only the size of the 3 realms. Therefore, the long-distance teleportation of the player legion had exceeded the area of absolute safety of the artifact. That was why there was such a huge accident when they encountered the barrier. It was actually very easy to solve this problem. As long as Lu Wu led the player legion to the landing site, the artifact space would also follow, forming an area of absolute safety at the landing site. In other words, Lu Wu only needed to personally lead the Legion in the future cross-border battle. In the area of absolute safety, no matter how strong the opponent was, as long as the location of the artifact space was not detected, no matter how strong the barrier was, it would never be able to block the connection between the artifact and the players. Lil Bailey was very confident about this. After understanding the reason, Lu Wu heaved a sigh of relief. The existence of the artifact was the foundation of the player's natural disaster. If the artifact was limited, why would Lu Wu risk the players' lives? Even for this cross-border expedition, Lu Wu had carefully scouted the wandering star before he set off. Only then did he feel at ease to allow the players to depart. However, he almost made a big mistake because he did not find the East Emperor's clone hidden deep under the wandering star. Now that he understood that the artifact's space had an area of absolute safety and its reliability, Lu Wu was relieved. After that, he devoted himself wholeheartedly to his studies. It had been more than 3 years since he obtained the artifact. 3 years ago, he was just a very inconspicuous ordinary person, running a small game website with no traffic and living a mediocre life. Over the past 3 years, Lu Wu felt that he had changed a lot and realized that he had grown a lot. But in his eyes, it was still not enough. It was far from enough. He had to hurry. The current peace in the human world was just an illusion. The Heaven Realm had always regarded the human race as an enemy, and the Heaven Realm could punish them at any time. The attitude of Donghuang's incarnation could be seen from the battle outside the domain. Although Lu Wu did not know why the Heaven Realm did not choose to completely wipe out the human race, it was still unknown if the Heaven Realm would do so in the future. He did not dare to gamble. Therefore, Lu Wu felt that he had to be strong enough to fight against the danger before it arrived. Otherwise, he would be letting down those human pioneers who had died in battle. The feeling of shouldering a heavy burden gave Lu Wu a strong determination to become stronger. At this moment, he was no longer the Lu Wu who was unwilling to learn and improve no matter how much Lil Bailey tried to persuade him. Reading the artifact entry-level creation and application manual written by Lil Bailey, Lu Wu was extraordinarily serious. In fact, he could use the artifact to directly copy many of the contents in the manual into his mind. But he did not do so. Just like the players who learned life classes, he did so to learn the detailed process of creation and pave the way for his own invention in the future. If he only relied on copying knowledge, he would only be able to copy the template in his mind and would not be able to innovate anymore. Lu Wu desired to be like Lil Bailey and be able to create whatever she wanted to create. After a while, Lu Wu closed the manual and waved his hand. A blood-stained tooth appeared in his hand. He had lost a lot of soul coins in the cross-border battle yesterday. But it was not for nothing, because he had obtained the tooth of Donghuang's incarnation. Originally, Lu Wu wanted Lil Bailey to make it into the negative totem of Donghuang Tai, so that it could absorb Donghuang Tai's strength over time. Just like the bronze god tree, he would be weakened by the absorption of the players. However, Lil Bailey shook her head and refused. The reason was simple. Because Donghuang Tai's strength was too strong. It was too risky to directly connect with the negative totem. Maybe he would discover the existence of the artifact's space. So, it was better not to do it for the sake of caution. After understanding the reason, Lu Wu gave up on the idea of making Donghuang Tai's negative totem. But the blood-stained tooth was not useless. Lu Wu was already preparing to give Donghuang Tai a surprise. Beiki, Mansion of the Dead. In the central square, Mo Xiaoxin had a proud smile on his face. He looked at his mother with a smug expression. However, Mo Lanlan gave him a look of disdain. She felt that her son had gone down the wrong path. Instead of being a polemicist, he had chosen to become a decomposer. Moreover, he was so full of himself after getting the 23rd place. He was such a good-for-nothing. From Mo Lanlan's point of view, Mo Xiaoxin should have stirred up a storm in the forum and increased his bounty value. He should have reached a bounty of 10 million soul coins as soon as possible. This was what a qualified son should do. Now that he had become a decomposer without making any progress, it was simply putting the cart before the horse. He had definitely gone down the wrong path. Just kill yourself. It's too embarrassing to only get the 23rd place. Mo Lanlan was furious when she thought of this. She could not help but look at Emo Xiaoxin and say, "You said that I was just passing the exam. Don't you think that my current result is surprising?" Emo Xiaoxin could not help but glare at her. "My son, Emo Lanlan, will either get the first place or no place at all. Otherwise, he will be a disgrace to me. Surprise? I'm a little scared now," Emo Lanlan said with a look of disdain. "Listen, this is what a biological mother should say." Emo Xiaoxin had mixed feelings when he heard this. Other biological mothers hoped that their sons would be more successful, but his mother was completely different. Not only was she an internet addict, she even gave birth to a son as a toy and a tool to make money. It was 2F** King real. Emo Xiaoxin immediately felt the strong malice from his mother. At this time, Emo Lanlan opened the trading panel and threw hundreds of spherical crystals to Emo Xiaoxin. "Since you've already changed your class, you can't waste it. Go and break these down." Emo Xiaoxin opened the analysis subconsciously. Spirit Core, Rank 1 Treasure. Item Details: a spiritual crystal that has a small probability of being born in a spirit's body. It can be used for many life classes. "Why are you giving me this?" Emo Xiaoxin was stunned. "It's too cheap to put this thing on the auction house. You can break it down into elements and sell it. You should be able to sell it for more money. Oh, by the way, give me all the money you earn," Emo Lanlan reminded him in the end. "What about the handling fee?" Emo Xiaoxin glared after understanding his mother's idea. "You want handling fee from your mother? Do you know how much money I spent to raise you? If I use this money to raise pigs, I can raise at least 10 of them. Moreover, the price of pork is rising now. 10 pigs might be able to exchange for a better set of purple equipment," Emo Lanlan said with disdain. "Pigs? Purple equipment?" Emo Xiaoxin could not help but ridicule his mother's analogy. Although it did make sense. "But my teacher taught me that a mother's love is selfless. Why can't I understand that? Why are you glaring at me? Hurry up and break it down and sell it. I've been short on money lately and I can't help but want to sell you in advance." "I'll do it right away." Emo Xiaoxin, who had a strong desire to live, immediately agreed. "Good boy." Emo Lanlan reached out and patted Emo Xiaoxin's shoulder. Then, she carried her sword and walked out of the city. Her destination was still the Ghost Mountains. She went in and out daily. Emo Xiaoxin trembled as he watched his mother leave. He had been suppressed by his mother since he was young. He did not even have a rebellious phase. How would he dare to rebel? Under the suppression of such an old mother, the consequence of rebellion was a beating. It was simple and violent. Although he had a little fantasy that his mother wanted to sell him out as a joke, there was a high chance that his mother was serious. Emo Xiaoxin did not dare to gamble on this. He could not figure out his mother's train of thought. She was a godlike internet addict, his only nemesis on the spiritual level. He could not afford to offend her. He compromised. Thinking of this, he found an empty space in the mansion of the dead's central plaza. He took out the tools that were given to him after his job advancement and got ready to work. He broke down the hundreds of spirit cores. Emo Xiaoxin did not think much of it because it was a level 1 treasure. After all, he had reached the 3rd stage in the trial space. He had broken down a level 3 item with a passing 79.3% decomposition rate. This level 1 spirit core was not a problem for him at all. After activating his spirit eye, countless light spots gathered to form a galaxy in front of him. Emo Xiaoxin immediately began to check what elements these light spots were made of so that he could choose the corresponding frequency to break them off. After a while, Emo Xiaoxin was surprised to find that among these light spots, there was a gray elemental light spot that occupied a third of the area. However, he had never seen this element in the introductory manual of a decomposer. The introductory manual recorded a total of 5,000 elements, all of which were suitable for beginners to break down. Therefore, Mo Xiaoxin could not help but suspect that this element was not a basic element but an element of a higher level. Thinking of this, he immediately put away the items and walked towards the library of the underworld. After about 20 minutes of walking, after entering the library, everything around him changed. What appeared in front of him were rows of bookshelves that stretched as far as the eye could see. There was also a classification board hanging in each area. Weapons, equipment, spells, potion refinement. The huge library in front of him was only on the first floor. Some players had analyzed the total area of the library of the underworld and found that it was almost the size of the underworld. Moreover, as the library adopted a parallel space model, it was set to have a limit on the number of players that could be accommodated in each space. Moreover, the players that entered the library would be evenly distributed to different planes, so there would not be a crowding situation. At this moment, there were already many players in this parallel space library. Most of them were gathered in the spells and skills area, learning new knowledge. Mo Xiaoxin was also very familiar with this place. He immediately walked towards the newly opened Decomposer knowledge area. As soon as he stepped into the Decomposer knowledge area, the reading interface popped up. A series of book names were arranged in front of him. There was also a search bar on it for players to find the books they wanted. Seeing this, Mo Xiaoxin immediately entered the elemental table into the search bar. Instantly, the corresponding book appeared. Elemental Characteristics Table, Elemental Breakdown Encyclopedia, Elemental Table. Complete. Mo Xiaoxin did not hesitate to click on Elemental Table, Complete. Instantly, a book slowly moved from the bookshelf and floated in front of Mo Xiaoxin. Chapter 596. After getting the books he wanted, Mo Xiaoxin found a secluded place in the library and sat down to start studying. Unlike the introductory books, this elemental table described the different characteristics of 36,888 elements. Although it did not specify the method of decomposition, it was exactly what he wanted. Time passed slowly as he compared the colors and shapes of the elements. About an hour later, Mo Xiaoxin, who was reading the book, was overjoyed because he finally found the specific explanation of the gray element. The words and pictures on the book describe the name and use of the element in detail. Negative element. Elemental details. A special element constructed from negative emotions and negative special energy. It is very common but very difficult to separate. It is classified as one of the top 3,000 elements. Elemental function. Can be used for training, but cannot be used for professions such as blacksmithing and pharmacology. Mo Xiaoxin was shocked when he saw the introduction on the book. He did not expect a top-notch element to be classified as the hardest to decompose among the Grade 1 items. Speaking of negative elements, he thought of the demonic god after spending years on the forum and understanding a lot of game content. It seemed that the demonic god used this kind of power. As for how to use it for training, Mo Xiaoxin knew nothing about it. Mo Xiaoxin suddenly felt that it was troublesome. This was because he could not decompose such a top-notch element as it was too difficult. However, Mo Xiaoxin did not give up. He stood up and went to the decomposers section again. He found a elemental decomposition table and began to check the decomposition frequency of the negative element. Just as Mo Xiaoxin thought, the difficulty of decomposing top-notch elements was much higher than that of low-level element. This was because decomposing this type of element was not just a single frequency. As it was decomposed, it needed to change its frequency, and every change had to match the changing negative element. At this moment, Mo Xiaoxin felt a headache coming on. This was because the negative element was an important part of the spirit core and took up more than half of it. If he only decomposed the other elements and sold them while discarding the negative element, he might not only not make money but also lose money. He would be hung up and beaten by his own mother. Mo Xiaoxin trembled. What was more terrifying was that if he could not complete the task, his career might end because he was going to be sold. On one hand was the task given by his own mother, and on the other hand was a difficult task. Although he was ranked 23rd in the decomposer trial, Mo Xiaoxin was still self-aware and knew that he couldn't handle the extraction of such elements. At this moment, Mo Xiaoxin felt wronged and pitiful. It's too hard for me. At this moment, he suddenly remembered the elementary school student who was hanging on the wall. If it was him, there would be no problem. Mo Xiaoxin was completely convinced by Kong Yi, who had obtained the first place in the alchemy competition. Back then, he had thought that if a primary school student like Kong Yi were to participate in the disintegrator trial, the first place would be secured. Who would have thought that the wallpaper student would actually run to participate in the alchemist trial, and he was hundreds of times ahead of the person in second place, firmly occupying the top spot. After 3 years of fighting, Mo Xiaoxin felt that this elementary school student named Kong Yi was the scariest and had the greatest potential among all the cheats he had ever seen. It was as if he really had a cheat. He seemed to be invincible in all fields. He had comprehended a top-notch cultivation technique that had never appeared in the entire server before, and he knew the content of decomposition like the back of his hand. After that, he had taken first place in the alchemist trial. Life with cheats started from primary school. From Mo Xiaoxin's point of view, there seemed to be nothing that could stop the rise of this primary school student other than preventing him from becoming addicted. Mo Xiaoxin was also looking forward to the amazing performance this primary school student would bring in the future. He believed that with a primary school student like Kong Yi, the future cross-server battles would be very exciting. The original server would also continue to firmly occupy the number 1 position in the entire server, becoming the father of all servers. However, from that day onwards, this primary school student actually did not come online again. This made Mo Xiaoxin very confused. At this moment, he opened his friend list. It was still the same. Although he had added Kong Yi as a friend, his name was grayed out. Mo Xiaoxin could not help but sigh. It seemed that it was impossible to ask for external help. However, it was impossible for him to give up just like that. Mo Xiaoxin immediately turned his head and looked at the rows of bookshelves in front of him. Find a way to extract negative element. With so many books, he did not believe that there was no useful way. After some hesitation, Mo Xiaoxin decided to work hard. If there was no way, then he would find a way. After that, he was completely immersed in the sea of books. He flipped through the corresponding books one by one, understanding everything related to negative elements, as well as how to use them. The most important thing was the method of extraction. During his days in the library, when Mo Xiaoxin was thirsty or hungry, he would directly buy items from the auction house. He did not waste a single second of his time. During this time, his biological mother, Mo Lanlan, sent him a voice message, asking if he had settled it. Mo Xiaoxin immediately said that there was no problem, but his heart was filled with bitterness. She was his biological mother after all. Resistance was unfilial, and not resistance meant getting beaten up. Although his biological mother was beautiful and moving, when she beat someone up, it was really painful. Mo Xiaoxin had the most right to speak about this and had experienced it many times. Therefore, in order to not get beaten up, Mo Xiaoxin racked his brains and took the initiative to learn all kinds of unpopular knowledge. As he immersed himself in learning, Mo Xiaoxin really did find a method to extract negative emotions. This was a technique called negative body. What attracted Mo Xiaoxin was that this technique recorded a method to extract negative emotions. As long as he had this, he would be able to extract the negative elements contained in any object. He did not need to follow the frequency of decomposition like a decomposer, which was very troublesome. Mo Xiaoxin, who had found a method, was a little excited. As long as he had this, it would be extremely easy for him to extract negative element. Thus, Mo Xiaoxin began to carefully read this technique. But soon, Mo Xiaoxin frowned. Although this cultivation method could use negative elements to cultivate, this cultivation method had a huge flaw. After cultivating this cultivation method, all other elements would not be able to be used. For example, Mo Xiaoxin was originally a sorcerer and could control all kinds of elements to cast spells in battle. However, after cultivating this technique, he could only choose to control a single negative element. This was because the negative elements would repel other elements. Cultivating this technique was to create a body of pure negative energy. However, when he flipped to the last page of the technique, the remark on it made Mo Xiaoxin's eyes widen. Divine technique remark. Only taught to the fated. Although negative elements are not rare elements, the amount needed to cultivate them is extremely large. Relying on other treasures and materials to extract negative elements to cultivate is extremely troublesome and costly. However, there is another method to collect negative elements that is extremely feasible. As long as you have the ability, you can obtain a large amount of negative elements. Method: attack people. Attack people. Attack people. Find a large group. As long as you can attack them, there will be an endless supply of negative elements for you to use. As long as you don't anger them to death, the negative elements will be endless. Reading this, for some reason, Mo Xiaoxin suddenly felt that this technique seemed to be quite pleasing to the eye. As for the reason, it was in the remark at the end. At this moment, he thought of his career of attacking people in the forum for 3 years. This period of time was truly filled with bloodshed. Many heroes were cried by him on the forum. Although they gritted their teeth because of this, they could not do anything to him. Thinking about it now, Mo Xiaoxin suddenly felt a little proud. However, what made Mo Xiaoxin frown was that he was attacking people on the forum and not in the game. If he were to really attack people in the game, no matter how many lives he had, it would not be enough. It would be impossible for him to leave the safe zone. Moreover, among the 5 major servers, none of them were Garden of Eden that he could survive in. This was because he did not miss a single one of the forums of the 5 servers and attacked all of them. It could be said that his enemies were all over the entire battle. Although it was satisfying, the consequences were also very serious. If he were to cultivate this technique and attack people in the game to become stronger, he would definitely be tired of living and would want to quit the game. Thinking of this, Mo Xiaoxin sighed. Although he felt that this technique was very suitable for him, the risks were too great and he could not cultivate it. As a hidden expert at attacking people, he would never take the risk of attacking people in the game. This was one of the reasons why he was able to live safely until now. He stuck to his principles. Thinking of this, Mo Xiaoxin prepared to return the book and continue to find other ways to extract negative element. After clicking on the return book in the function panel, Mo Xiaoxin could not help but sigh. It would be great if the forum was connected to the game. That way, he might be able to become a small wall cheat by relying on this technique. When this thought appeared in his mind, Mo Xiaoxin was suddenly stunned. The forum was connected to the game? It seemed like the forum was connected to the game. For example, soul coins were the currency of the forum and could be used to tip people in the forum. Another example was the live broadcast, which was seamlessly connected to the game. There was no delay or lag when watching the live broadcast, and the forum could be opened in the game. When this thought appeared, Mo Xiaoxin could not help but become excited. After all, there were infinite possibilities in the battle. This was also the consensus of all players, and Mo Xiaoxin thought so too. Therefore, if he attacked people in the forum, he could also extract negative element. Thinking of this, Mo Xiaoxin could not stay calm. He immediately took down the book that he had already returned, feeling slightly excited in his heart. This was extremely risky. There was no account deletion function in the battle. In other words, if he cultivated this negative physique but could not extract negative elements from attacking people in the forum, then his account would be useless. What could a sorcerer who could not control the elements to cast spells do? Could he wield a staff and fight in close combat? Although insulting others was not the only way to cultivate the negative physique, in Mo Xiaoxin's opinion, this was the only way to choose. After all, he was not a tycoon like Gu Yu. It was unrealistic to rely on buying materials that contained negative elements to cultivate. Therefore, the only way was to attack people. There was no cost, and it was also his hobby. It was a perfect match for him. However, the risk was great. Before he cultivated, he did not know if the forum was as perfectly connected to the game as he thought. If he did not succeed, then he would really be like what his mother said, living a mediocre life. In the future, he could only be a full-time fishing player. At most, his subclass would be a melee sorcerer. Thinking of this, Mo Xiaoxin was a little hesitant. Originally, he only wanted to find a way to extract negative elements, but he did not expect to find a way that might lead to the wall cheat. Risk? Opportunity? However, if he did not try, how would he know the result? Looking at the book in his hand, Mo Xiaoxin felt as if there were two paths shrouded in fog in front of him. Chapter 597. These were two completely different paths, but there was no room for regret after making the choice. This undoubtedly made Mo Xiaoxin very conflicted. Holding the book, Mo Xiaoxin leaned against the bookshelf and slowly sat on the ground, deep in thought. He had to admit that he liked this martial art from the bottom of his heart. The method of absorbing negative elements to grow was practically tailor-made for him. However, the biggest problem now was that if he could not absorb negative elements from the forum after practicing this martial art, then this martial art would be useless. He could only be a melee sorcerer in the future. Mo Xiaoxin smiled awkwardly as he recalled the scene of him waving his staff around on the battlefield and smashing it randomly. However, he was not willing to give up just like that. It had been 3 whole years. Like other players, he had been searching for opportunities to rise. Now that the opportunity was right in front of him, how could he give it up so easily? Holding the book, Mo Xiaoxin felt like he was going bald from worry. As a very rational contrarian, he would never act rashly when faced with a difficult problem. He had to analyze the pros and cons before making a decision. It was the same when he criticized others on the forum. He was never a grumpy keyboard warrior who scolded without reason. Instead, he would find reasons and reasons, stand in front of the truth, and argue with the other party. Time passed bit by bit. A batch of players in the library left, and a new batch came in. Mo Xiaoxin was still analyzing the pros and cons. In the end, it was a voice call from his mother that made Mo Xiaoxin make up his mind. In the voice call, Mo Lanlan said that he was only 3,000 soul coins away from buying the level 150 epic quality weapon, Destruction. She asked him to hurry up and make money, or else she would kill him in the name of justice. Under his mother's suppression, Mo Xiaoxin gritted his teeth and made a decision. I'll King learn it. After that, Mo Xiaoxin began to practice according to the method described in the book. The cultivation method in the book was not like meditation like in the TV series, but fantasy. He imagined a black mountain in his mind, using the picture in the book as a reference, and continued to sculpt the imaginary picture until the trees and flowers on the mountain became vivid. Although it looked easy, it was definitely a mental task. However, what surprised Mo Xiaoxin was that he could not get the black mountain out of his mind even though he had only imagined it in his mind. As long as he closed his eyes, this black mountain would appear in his mind. This was completely different from what was described in the books, where it was extremely difficult to cross the threshold, and the moment one's train of thought broke, the black mountain in one's mind would collapse. Am I a martial arts prodigy? Mo Xiaoxin couldn't help but wonder. However, time was of the essence. His biological mother was about to execute him in the name of justice with a machete. Mo Xiaoxin immediately immersed himself in his fantasy and began to meticulously sculpt the mountain. However, the subsequent cultivation process was so smooth that Mo Xiaoxin found it unbelievable. In just 2 hours, he had completely visualized the Black Mountain. According to the book, although this cultivation technique wasn't a top-notch cultivation technique, it was extremely difficult to cultivate. It was related to one's personality, physique, and other factors. It was a cultivation technique that consumed a lot of resources and was extremely difficult to cultivate. It was a strenuous and not necessarily rewarding cultivation technique. Therefore, Mo Xiaoxin felt that it was too king amazing to be able to get started in just 2 hours. At this moment, a notification popped up. Game notification. Congratulations, you have successfully cultivated the growth type skill. Negative body. Game notification 2. Negative body is a growth type skill. It has an extremely high upper limit and an extremely low lower limit. It is an ability that is very difficult to master. Player, please find your own way to grow. Seeing the game notification, Mo Xiaoxin closed his eyes subconsciously. Suddenly, the small black mountain appeared in his mind again. This mountain had a name in the book, Negative Heart Core. Other than the fact that he had to rely on fantasy to get started, the subsequent growth of this small mountain had to be irrigated with negative elements. There was no other way. With a thought from Mo Xiaoxin, the mountain in his mind trembled slightly. The flowers, plants, and trees on it swayed along with it. Everything seemed lifelike. When he opened his eyes again, Mo Xiaoxin took out his staff from his channel and began to condense a water ball in his palm with a nervous heart. Just as he thought, the black mountain in his mind automatically appeared the moment the water element was summoned. It shook and dispersed the free water element in the air, making it impossible for him to condense it. Mo Xiaoxin then tried using fire element, earth element, and other spells. However, whenever a spell fluctuation appeared, it would be dispersed by the black mountain in his mind. Mo Xiaoxin originally wanted to continue trying. At that moment, the game notification appeared. Game warning: it is forbidden to use spells in the safe zone. If you violate the rules again, a certain amount of soul coins will be deducted as punishment. Seeing the game notification, Mo Xiaoxin immediately gave up on trying. He also understood that it was useless to try anymore. It could be said that the current him had broken away from the scope of an elemental mage and was one step closer to being a melee mage. Fortunately, there was still room for redemption. Thinking of this, Mo Xiaoxin opened the forum skillfully. With a nervous heart, he was ready to flame. Mo Xiaoxin was so familiar with this that it had become an instinct. Looking at the posts that were constantly refreshed in the forum, he even knew how many points in the original poster's words were worth debating just by looking at the title. Although he was very nervous, Mo Xiaoxin instantly got into the zone when he clicked on the post. After a virtual keyboard was projected, he began to type with a pitter-patter sound. The forum had a very high-tech function, which was that the thoughts in one's mind could be directly converted into words without the need to type on the keyboard. However, in Mo Xiaoxin's opinion, when it came to debating someone, the pitter-patter sound of typing on the keyboard was the best feeling. Soon, Mo Xiaoxin forgot his current purpose and was completely immersed in the pleasure of turning into a debater. From the main forum to the subsections, and then to the forums of other servers, he could not stop after activating 5 times in a second. His keen insight allowed him to quickly find points and then attack the original poster on a spiritual level. After a series of flashy actions, his bounty in the bounty section increased again. 3 hours later, Mo Xiaoxin reluctantly closed the forum. To him, the forum felt like returning home. Everyone there was talented, and their words were pleasant to listen to. He loved to see them gnash their teeth in hatred but could not do anything about it. After stretching, Mo Xiaoxin, who was feeling very comfortable, suddenly froze. He suddenly remembered the problem with the negative body technique. Because he was too engrossed, he completely forgot about the important matter. With an incomparably nervous heart, he clicked on the attribute panel. Mo Xiaoxin, player. Profession: Elementalist, first class, ability details. Elemental heart, recovers a certain amount of spiritual energy value every second blocked. Elemental affinity, elemental casting speed is reduced by 20% blocked. A negative body, growth type technique. Technique details: after successfully cultivating the negative body, all elemental abilities except for negative elements will be blocked. Technique progress: first class, 0/2000 basic technique abilities. Elemental isolation, negative control, nothingness, elemental isolation, special passive. Ability details: all elemental spells will be ineffective against you. Negative control, active. Ability details: manipulate negative elements and inject them into the opponent's body, causing the opponent to have negative emotions, causing a spiritual impact, causing the opponent to have negative emotions. The amount of damage depends on the technique's cultivation level. Technique creator remarks: let the opponent die in pain, haha. Nothingness, ability details: turn the body into negative element. In this state, the body will have no form, physical and elemental spells will be ineffective against you, curse-type spell damage will be halved, movement speed will be increased by 300%, lasts for 5 minutes, lengthens as the technique grows, cooldown time, 20 minutes. Looking at his analysis panel, Mo Xiaoxin was stunned on the spot. Although the ability was indeed very strong, it was simply a self-defense expert, immune to all kinds of escape skills. Even the only active attack skill was the ability to make the opponent feel autistic and then wait for an opportunity to escape. At least that was how Mo Xiaoxin saw it. It could be said that Mo Xiaoxin liked the supplementary ability of this technique very much. However, the biggest problem was that he had been arguing on the forum for 3 hours, but the cultivation progress was still 0. There was no progress at all. At this moment, Mo Xiaoxin panicked. He felt that he was one step closer to the road of no return as a melee mage. The forum and the game were not interconnected? Before he could use the ability of the negative body to make other players feel autistic, Mo Xiaoxin felt that he was going to be autistic first. Because in his opinion, the forum was the only place he could collect negative emotions. I'm done for. Thinking of this, Mo Xiaoxin, who was unwilling to give up, took out a spirit core from the channel and began to extract the negative elements inside it. He wanted to see how the cultivation progress would be if he relied on absorbing the negative elements in the treasure. Suddenly, the negative elements in the spirit core turned into a cloud of mist and was extracted. The gray color inside the spirit core also disappeared, turning into an almost transparent crystal. Compared to a decomposer, the ability of the negative body technique saved Mo Xiaoxin a lot of steps when he extracted the negative element. Then, under Mo Xiaoxin's control, the negative elements were absorbed into his body. Then, he quickly opened his personal panel. Negative body, technique progress, level 1, 1.6/2000. At this moment, Mo Xiaoxin felt that he was one step closer to becoming a melee mage. Although it was only a first-tier Spectre Soul Nucleus, it could still be sold for around 20 soul coins. In other words, if he wanted to complete the level 1 cultivation, he would have to spend at least 25,000 soul coins. However, this was only the first stage. The subsequent cultivation costs would definitely increase exponentially. Autistic. Mo Xiaoxin felt that this kind of cultivation method was no longer a question of difficulty. It was a complete waste of money. What's the point of cultivating? I've changed to melee mage. Mo Xiaoxin thought to himself in despair. Depressed, Mo Xiaoxin hugged the technique book and sat on the ground with his back against the bookshelf. His body was trembling slightly. For this account, he had worked hard for 3 years. During this period, he had fished to save money, gathered equipment, and gathered materials for a profession advancement. He had walked step by step, although he did not keep up with the first echelon of players and advance to a 5 elements warlock. He had relied on hard work to advance to the new mage profession, elemental warlock. At this moment, it seemed that all his efforts were in vain. The more Mo Xiaoxin thought about it, the sadder he became. He opened the forum again. Every time he was sad, he wanted to transfer his negative emotions to other forum players. It was time to fight. However, after opening the forum, a line of words on the upper right corner of his personal information suddenly caught his attention. Crayon Shinchan, forum account level. Veteran 300245/802405 points. Number of posts 9825. Number of replies 724052. Account balance soul coins 378. Negative elements special 443,326. At this moment, his expression gradually became interesting. Players often said that there were countless Easter eggs, countless surprises, and infinite possibilities in a battle. At this moment, Mo Xiaoxin felt that this sentence was really right. Sure enough, the forum was connected to the game. After practicing this technique, it was not that he could not extract negative elements from the forum. Instead, he needed a conversion process. Looking at the withdraw button under his account balance, he could not help but tear up. It seemed like he was going to rise. Chapter 598. The players who frequented the forum recently discovered that the frequency of Crayon Shinchan's appearance seemed to be increasing. Although he had always been a long-time user of the forum, compared to before, the frequency of his recent appearance had become more frequent. During this period there were all kinds of fancy bickering, and behind the funny expressions were the tears of many OP. Converging into a river. They couldn't argue with him, nor could they hit him. So what if the players gritted their teeth? According to Crayon Shinchan's words, "Are you angry? If you're angry, jump out of the game and beat me to death," laughing emoji. Many players were so angry that they wanted to smash their keyboards with this flawless, stubborn, and untraceable person. However, they couldn't do anything to him. In fact, Mo Xiaoxin's existence was of great help to the development of the forum. It could be said that he had promoted the development of many sections. For example, the guides posted by many professional players. Mo Xiaoxin could always rely on his strong understanding of the game to find faults in the detailed teaching content. This made the professional players more cautious when writing guides, afraid that they would be criticized by Mo Xiaoxin, and at the same time, lose face in front of the fans. Therefore, it could be said that his existence increased the quality of the strategy guides on the forum. This was imperceptibly helpful to many players who liked to read strategy guide. However, these advantages couldn't cover up Crayon Shinchan's bad deeds. Every veteran player on the forum could casually give countless examples of Crayon Shinchan's bad deeds. This was like when the non-server forum had just been opened. At that time, the non-server forum had just been opened, and the entire non-server player group was beaten badly by the Beast Clan. They died every day, and the gaming experience was extremely poor. Many players were almost in a state of autism. The existence of Crayon Shinchan made the non-server players feel even more depressed. Crayon Shinchan would never let go of rubbing salt in the wound. Although what he said was indeed very reasonable and true, it was really difficult to accept the truth at that time. For example, the 1000 Ways to Die for Non-Server Players, written by Crayon Shinchan, was still hanging on the non-server forum to this day. When many new players saw it, they would understand the dark times in the early days of the non-server, and the painful experience of the old players. This also became a black mark in the history of the African conquest that could not be erased. Therefore, the players chose to forget about Crayon Shinchan, who was a cancer in the forum, and remembered his viciousness. behind the huge bounty, was the common hatred of the players of the 5 great servers against a common enemy. It was the figures of the players who had been bullied by Mo Xiaoxin to the point of tears. His position as the most influential person on the forum had never been shaken in the past 3 years. Although there were players who wanted to copy Crayon Shinchan's legend, they followed his example and went around challenging people, trying to raise their own fame. However, no one had ever succeeded. The reason why Crayon Shinchan was called the god of arguments was that he liked to argue. However, when he argued, he was clear and pointed to the key points. This was something that others couldn't learn. Those imitators would only be called trolls, not trolls, and definitely not trolls. The difference was that the troll would scold the OP for no reason at all. What he did was to make his presence known. On the other hand, Crayon Shinchan directly poked at the OP's sore spot, found a reason that he could not refute, and used the truth to destroy the OP's spirit. Let me tell you one thing. What you're proud of, what you use to show off, is nothing. This was also one of the reasons why many players hated Mo Xiaoxin. He was right and there was no way to refute it. However, this group of players was very unhappy when they were criticized. Therefore, it was obvious who was stronger and weaker between the imitators and Crayon Shinchan. There were many trolls in battle, but there was only one god of arguments. Even Crayon Shinchan's popularity among the new players was extremely high. Many new players liked to enter the battle forum to learn about the game and learn about it like curious babies. Therefore, the first battle celebrity that they got to know was usually not a certain troll, but Crayon Shinchan, the god of arguments whose true identity was a mystery. Therefore, Mo Xiaoxin had become particularly active recently, which gave many players a headache. They always felt that if they said something wrong in a certain post, they would be humiliated by the god of arguments. However, just as countless players were having a headache, Mo Xiaoxin also encountered his own problem. After cultivating the negative physique recently, he thought that his future would be bright. He had reached the 2nd level of the technique in just a few days by extracting once a day. He was not far from the 3rd level, and his growth was rapid. This made Mo Xiaoxin feel that if he continued like this, he might become a member of the group of trolls. However, at this time the after effects came. Although he had been trolling diligently, the consequence was that the bounty in the bounty section had also increased. Compared to before, the increase curve had risen sharply. This was not a trivial matter for him. Every time he got closer to the 10 million bounty, Mo Xiaoxin felt that his mother's machete hanging over his head was also one step closer to his neck. The after effects of being active had both advantages and disadvantages. Based on the previous increase, there was still a period of time before he would be killed by his mother in the name of justice. However, judging from the recent increase, he was not far from death. Moreover, the more he jumped around in the forum, the happier his mother was. After all, it was all money. Mo Lanlan vividly displayed the saying, raising a child to protect oneself in old age. It was so real that it was cruel. This was Mo Xiaoxin's current situation. Arguing with others in the forum would not be far from death. However, if he did not argue, he would not be able to cultivate the technique. How to choose was a big problem that gave Mo Xiaoxin a headache. He was very clear that with his mother's personality, it was really possible that she would kill him with a knife and not feel the slightest bit of guilt. As the person who understood his mother the most, Mo Xiaoxin was very clear. His mother's personality had always been carefree. She never played games, and she did not use the so-called white lies that other parents said. What she said was the truth from the bottom of her heart. Although he was her son, in his mother's eyes, he might not be as useful as a set of top-grade epic equipment. Moreover, according to his mother, every time she saw his bounty increase, she felt as if she saw a piglet in a pen getting fatter. As long as it got fatter, she could slaughter it and sell it for money. It was so real that it made her heart ache. His mother, who never hid her true heart, was Mo Xiaoxin's biggest nemesis. She was a lingering shadow. Recently, Mo Xiaoxin discovered a problem in his research on the negative body technique. That was, he could only open the forum in the game to argue with others in order to increase the balance of the negative elements in the forum. If he opened the forum in the computer after he went offline, not only would he not gain any negative elements by arguing with others, even the balance of the negative elements would be hidden. In other words, if he wanted to cultivate this technique, he could only open the forum in the game to argue with others. However, doing so in reality was completely useless as it would not increase the balance of the negative elements at all. Mo Xiaoxin only thought that it was the game design and did not think much of it. Anyway, since he had a gaming chamber, he basically did not need to use the computer anymore. He did not feel that there was any problem. However, he was prepared to stop using the forum for a while. Yesterday, his mother happily told him to keep up the good work. At that moment, Mo Xiaoxin felt the strong malice from his mother. Therefore, if he continued to argue with her, his battle career might end prematurely. For Lu Wu, who often surfed the forum, what happened to Mo Xiaoxin could not be hidden from him. He did not know whether to laugh or cry at Mo Xiaoxin's thoughts at that time. It was one thing for him to hide behind the scenes and harvest leaks, but Mo Xiaoxin actually came up with his own way of harvesting leek. Lu Wu was dumbfounded. Mo Xiaoxin was now a forum farmer, relying on the huge number of forum players to continuously extract negative elements for his own growth. A player's potential was limitless, and there were always tricks up their sleeves. However, Mo Xiaoxin's tricks still hurt him. At this moment, Lu Wu really felt that this kid was a genius. He actually thought of an alternative way of harvesting leeks, and he even did it in the forum. He could not help but be impressed. Developing his hobby into something that he relied on for his own growth, it was a godlike operation. The additional negative balance in Mo Xiaoxin's personal information in the forum was added by Lu Wu. This was because he thought that the idea was really good, and it did not affect his soul coin income, nor did it affect the soul coin production of other players. To Lu Wu, the strength of a player was only good, there was no harm. More importantly, he knew that Mo Xiaoxin was a player who loved to fight. In the past 3 years, he had a deep impression of this player. This was because whenever he opened a random post in the forum, he would always see Crayon Shinchan's sarcastic replies. It was simply everywhere. However, at that time, Lu Wu only thought it was fun and did not take it seriously. After all, having the ability to scold people was not a wall-level talent, and it could not bring any growth effect to the Calamity Army. At that time, Lu Wu was still thinking that it would be great if this player's growth in the game could be as strong as his ability to scold people. He did not expect that today, 3 years later, a random thought that he had back then would come true. This Crayon Shinchan actually came up with the godlike operation of forum farming. Lu Wu did not know whether to laugh or cry, but he had to admire him for achieving his own growth with his hobby. Lu Wu was looking forward to his next performance. Lu Wu also had a detailed understanding of the negative body technique during the period when Mo Xiaoxin was learning it. He realized that this cultivation technique was actually not that powerful. Some clues could be seen from the artifact's lack of regional announcements. Just like the artifact's analysis, the upper limit of this technique was very high, but the lower limit was also very low. It was still unknown whether he would be able to grow. Even the person who created this technique had only cultivated it to the 9th level, reaching the Ghost Emperor advanced stage. However, Lu Wu felt that this technique was very suitable for Mo Xiaoxin, and he might be able to create a miracle. There was such a large group of players in the forum, and Mo Xiaoxin's reserve of resources was much more superior than that of the creator. Coupled with his sarcastic talent, it was entirely possible for him to surpass the creator of the technique and go further and longer. At this time, Mo Xiaoxin had officially entered the scope of Lu Wu's observation, and then his subsequent performance would be recorded in the wall notebook. Lu Wu was looking forward to whether he could carve out a path of his own. Chapter 599. Once again, Rabbit walked out of the mansion of the dead and was surrounded by countless evil players. Listen, this rabbit can speak human language, and it's even scolding us. The leading man was surprised. The players' festive time had begun. They started running around the land of Beiki, searching for the lost rabbit for Chang'e Mid-Autumn Festival Event 1. Chang'e searching for the rabbit all day. Rabbit picked up the leaf it had just plucked and continued munching on it. Brother, let's be friends, shall we? Rabbit thought for a while and asked again sincerely. Amidst the rabbit's scolding, the three of them sincerely apologized and took out a pile of food as compensation. Only then did the rabbit temporarily swallow its anger. Along with the Dragon Boat Festival, the Spring Festival, and the Qingming Festival, they were known as the 4 traditional festivals of Qi Dragon. Event Tip 2. Moon Rabbit is immune to all damage and control, except for the quest item. Rabbit turned around suspiciously and was shocked to find a rabbit that looked similar to him lying beside him, munching on a leaf as well. Inexplicably disappointed, the rabbit lowered its head, bent its body, and flicked its ears, looking discouraged. Red pearls on the opposite shore leads to 3 lives. Living in Qi Dragon, it was natural that he had heard many fairy tales since he was young. As the event began, white rabbits descended from the sky above the land of Beiki. Event item: Rabbit net, 5 minutes cooldown, 15 meters, 20% chance of failure. Yes, that's it. Hurry up, don't let him escape. This was the reason why the players were looking forward to the event during Battle Royale. Just as it was holding the leaf and thinking about why, 3 players were quietly approaching it. Mid-Autumn Festival Event 4. Beautiful Flowers and Full Moon, 8 p.m. to 12 p.m. According to one of the players, Battle Royale made many players remember many festivals that they usually didn't care about. It played an important role in promoting traditional festivals. Event details. After the event begins, a puzzle will be displayed on the moon every 10 minutes. Players can look up at the moon and solve the puzzle. At this moment, Rabbit was roaring and saying all kinds of filthy words that it learned from Tongguaku. When they realized that the rabbit was a contracted beast of the players, the 3 players were extremely embarrassed. Boss, I saw a moon rabbit just now. It should have landed in this direction. Search carefully and don't let anyone get there first. After getting down from the tree, Rabbit was about to run in that direction. Realizing that the event had begun, the players all rushed out of the mansion of the dead. Noticing that the rabbit was getting closer, the moon rabbit suddenly raised its head in alarm. Then, it jumped down the tree and disappeared in a flash. After all, they looked too alike. Looking at the outside world, they are all King bad people who want to bully me. That's normal. It's a moon rabbit, so it's no different from a normal rabbit. His companion replied. Mid-Autumn Festival Event 3. Koi Presents, 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. Event tip: after the start of this event, the land of Beiki will randomly spawn moon rabbits. Each person can only complete this mission once. The Jade Soul East opened and Chang'e arrived. At this time, the leading player picked up its ear and handed it to Chang'e. Because they were afraid that the rabbit would escape, they did not analyze the rabbit's interface before catching it. Now that they received Chang'e's reply, the 3 of them were dumbfounded, so they quickly checked the rabbit's interface. It's so boring. I'll just eat some leaves. At this moment, the congestion appeared again. The Mid-Autumn Festival event, Moon Dream of Autumn, has officially started. Event 1, Chang'e Searching for the Rabbit, has officially started. The event item, Rabbit Catching Net, will now spawn moon rabbits randomly in the land of Beiki. Players, please catch them and hand them over to Chang'e. Since it was a legal holiday, many players were urging the damned officials to release the event early in the morning, saying that it was time to throw coins. At this moment, the rabbit was stunned. Let's go, I didn't expect to catch a moon rabbit at the beginning of the event. This is a good sign. Maybe we're going to get rich overnight from this mid-autumn festival event. At this moment, the rabbit suspected that this moon rabbit might be of the same breed as itself. It might even be a mystical rabbit with the bloodline of the herb-tampering rabbit. When Chang-yi arrived at the mansion of the dead under the moonlight, the event notification appeared in the minds of all the players. However, the smarter players had already arrived outside the city before the event officially started. They were afraid that they would be stuck at the entrance and waste a lot of time. Charming spirit of autumn water, at the same time as the game notification appeared, a voice rang in their ears. At this moment it missed Yi Sherwin very much. It was too dangerous for a rabbit to be alone outside. That's true. Let's go and submit our quest first. We'll catch another moon rabbit later. It was used to being alone in the past, but it had not felt this way for a long time ever since it started following Yi Sherwin. Event details. After the event starts, koi will randomly appear in all the rivers and lakes in Baiki. Players can go and fish there. Players who successfully catch a koi will receive a Mid-Autumn Festival mooncake as a gift from the koi. Use it to obtain a random item reward. Mid-Autumn Festival Event 2. Martial Arts Tournament under the moon all day. Yes, look carefully. Look at the tree in front of us, is that the rabbit? Event notification. The Mid-Autumn Festival mooncake obtained during this event can be gifted to other players. The giver will receive 5 luck points, and the probability of getting a high-quality item in the next lucky draw will be increased by 30%. Each Mid-Autumn Festival mooncake can only be gifted once. The event started with the stunning scene of Chang-yi descending to Earth, making the players feel as if they were suddenly surrounded by a festive atmosphere. It was also known as Lunar Eve, Mid-Autumn Festival, August Festival, August Festival, Moon Chasing Festival, Moon Playing Festival, Moon Worshipping Festival, Girls' Day, or Reunion Festival. It was a traditional cultural festival that was popular among many ethnic groups and countries in the Chinese culture circle. As the Chinese people spread all over the world, this day became a worldwide festival. Bodhi was not a tree that provoked the mortal world. For this day, the players were always looking forward to it. The confused rabbit lowered its head and looked at the leaf in its arms, then at the direction where the moon rabbit had left. After some thought, it decided to chase after it and ask. Suddenly, the rabbit had the urge to become sworn brothers with the moon rabbit. After all, it was its first time meeting its own kind. And Chang-yi was undoubtedly one of the most impressive characters in the fairy tales. In fact, the festive atmosphere in the game was even stronger than in reality, making this day even more memorable to the players. At this moment, the flowers and trees in the city bloomed with colorful flowers. Bursts of fragrance spread throughout the city, making people feel relaxed and happy. Festive lanterns were also hung under the eaves of all the buildings, filling the air with a festive atmosphere. At this moment, the players were dumbfounded. What the f***ck? The dress was swept away and the fragrance was scattered. Rules of the event. The first 10 million players to answer each riddle correctly will receive a small random gift. During this time, the rabbit was repeatedly captured by Chang-yi in the central plaza of the Mansion of the Dead and handed over to the rabbit as the Moon Rabbit. At this moment, 3 capture nets appeared. Then, 3 figures leaped out from the bushes and pounced on the rabbit like hungry wolves. For a moment, the rabbit was scared silly. It thought that it was a good start, but it accidentally injured its allies. Because Yi Sherwin was dragged away by his mother to visit relatives, he didn't come online today, so the rabbit could only celebrate this festival by itself. If it didn't know that it had no siblings, it would have suspected that these were its long-lost compatriot. At this moment, at the border between the barren lands and the cliffs of desperation, a rabbit was lying on a tree and eating leaves. When they opened the bag, the rabbit was still angrily cursing. The event channel was instantly flooded with players' praises. Event details. After this event begins, an event NPC named Chong-E will appear in the Mansion of the Dead. Players can accept quests from this NPC and help her find the lost moon rabbit. After finding and capturing her, players can return to the Mansion of the Dead and receive a generous reward. At this moment, the players were very excited to witness the descent of Chong-E during the battle. Some praised the dog officials for their efforts in organizing the event, while some lamented the burning budget of the dog officials. However, when Chong-E saw the rabbit, she was also very surprised. Her beautiful eyes wandered, and her red lips opened slightly as she shook her head. After doing this for dozens of times, the rabbit almost shut himself up. Her voice was smooth and pleasant, like a pot of wine intoxicating the mind. However, the rabbit's tragedy was not over yet. Just as it thought, it looked too much like the moon rabbit. At this moment, the rabbit almost doubted its life. "Descendant of Bakey, you've caught the wrong person. This is not my moon rabbit." Looking up at the bright moon, it suddenly felt a little lonely. Therefore, they were always looking forward to the festival. Now that it was here, they were ready to make a fortune from the dog officials. The rabbit was confused. Event notification. The cross-server opponents matched for this event will have their attributes adjusted. The aloofness of the moon rabbit baffled the rabbit. Chatting along the way, the three of them returned to the Mansion of the Dead happily and arrived at the central square where Chong-E was. Lu Wu did not disappoint the players. Early in the morning, he announced the Mid-Autumn Festival event in the game and forum. However, the moon rabbit ignored the rabbit and continued to nibble on the leaves with a satisfied look on her face. Following the start of the event, the entire Mansion of the Dead underwent a huge change. Event details. After the start of this event, every player will be qualified to participate in the server's individual competition match 3 times. During this event, every victory will be rewarded with a Mid-Autumn Fortune Bag, randomly selected prize. Those who win 3 matches in a row will be rewarded with a Mid-Autumn Gift Bag. The surrounding sky gradually darkened. Under the astonished gazes of the players, a golden full moon rose slowly. The gentle moonlight shone down, converging into a sparkling path that led straight to the center of the Mansion of the Dead. The biggest difference between this game and other games was that every event in the battle was exceptionally meticulous, giving the players a strong festive atmosphere. If one did not open the analysis menu, they would not be able to tell the difference at all. Official message. People say that the moon is beautiful in the autumn. Would you like to share it with us? The players of the battle were already used to having events during every festival. At this moment, a graceful figure emerged from the moon, stepping on the bridge formed by the moonlight and slowly descending to the mortal world. It was indeed the case. A few days before the arrival of every festival, the forum would discuss the upcoming festival and even speculate what kind of event the damned officials would come up with. Having escaped from the evil claws of the 3-man team, it meant that the danger had been resolved. Mid-Autumn Festival Theme. Moon Dream of Autumn. August 15th, the Mid-Autumn Festival. Just like that, the rabbit was caught in a daze, and before he could even struggle, he was thrown into a bag. You like to eat leaves too. Are you a high-level rabbit too? After some thought, Rabbit took 2 steps forward and tried to greet the person. Her sleeves broke the moon in the frost. Descendants of Bakey, can you find the moon rabbit for me? However, as he chewed on the leaves, he suddenly realized that something was wrong. There was a rustling sound next to him that was exactly the same as when he was chewing on the leaves. The half-song was like a floating shadow. Chong-E walked out from the moon. Her eyes were as clear as water, and her clothes were light and gauzy. Her entire body was filled with the interpretation of beauty. She looked even more like an otherworldly fairy. Her ribbons floated in the air, surrounded by a fairy aura. Chapter 600. The event had officially begun, and the players in the land of Bakey were in a frenzy. During this period, there were groups of players everywhere trying to catch the moon rabbit. The rabbit was so scared that it hid in the sewers of the mansion of the dead, not daring to come out again. To it, the outside world was too scary. Players nowadays were like gorillas that would transform into gorillas on a full moon night. Every full moon night, their brains would short-circuit and they would wreak havoc. The trembling rabbit hugged itself, feeling wronged and afraid. It could only hide in the sewers and wait for the cute Ye-Sure One to rescue it. It was too hard to be a rabbit. 2 hours after the Mid-Autumn Festival event began, some players had already caught the moon rabbit required for the event and received their reward. Since the Chang-E rabbit hunting event could only be completed once per player, most of the players had no intention of searching for the moon rabbit. Hence, they set their sights on the second event, the Moonlight Tournament, which was also open to the public. Most of the players had never experienced an individual tournament that was synchronized across the entire server, so they were undoubtedly curious. Moreover, the attributes of the all-server tournament would be balanced. As long as one's skills were up to par, there was a high chance that they would be rewarded. Hence, these players opened the event menu and began to randomly match opponents across the server, looking forward to their performance. During this period, as more and more players caught the moon rabbit and completed the Chang-E rabbit hunting quest, the Moonlight Tournament gradually became more popular. Matches across the entire server began, and the various servers began to compete fiercely for the victory rankings. Meanwhile, in the Mansion of the Dead, Yuan Fong was eating a player's homemade mooncake as he happily clicked the match button for the Moonlight Tournament. Others took the tournament seriously, but Yuan Fong did not care whether he took it seriously or not. Whether he could win or not depended on his opponent. The more competitive his opponent was, the higher his chances of winning. If his opponent had no intention of defeating him, the match would basically end in a draw. Hence, he wanted to be passive in the individual tournament because he did not have the ability to take the initiative even if he wanted to. As a player who had almost 1,000 draws and only one win, Yuan Fong felt that every time he participated in a tournament, it was like going through the motions and chatting with his opponent for half an hour. Due to the generous rewards for winning the tournament, Yuan Fong could not wait any longer and chose to participate. Although he didn't have much hope of winning, but he definitely wouldn't lose. If nothing unexpected happened, it would still be a draw. As he waited, a game notification appeared. Game notification. Successfully matched with a Baiki player, Niefeng. Battle record. 24 consecutive defeats, 0 wins. Seeing that they were about to enter the individual arena, Yuan Fong hurriedly stuffed the mooncake in his hand into his mouth and prepared himself. As the countdown continued, the surroundings gradually blurred. When it became clear again, Yuan Fong found himself at the top of a mountain. The raging wind whistled past Zhang Xian's ears. Turning his head around, he saw a bottomless abyss below him. A bright moon hung above his head, and his surroundings seemed to be a training ground filled with all kinds of weapons. Yuan Fong habitually sat down and waited for the competition to officially begin. Then, he would chat with his opponent about life. He wasn't too familiar with Niefeng, because Niefeng was always on the move with who he and rarely returned to the Mansion of the Dead. Although Yuan Fong knew that this person was a member of the group of wall cheaters, he didn't know his abilities in detail, because in Yuan Fong's opinion, none of his opponents could do anything to him. What's more, his opponent had lost 24 times in a row. His opponent should be a lifestyle player, which meant that he wouldn't be able to do anything to him. However, when Niefeng realized that his opponent was Yuan Fong, he was also stunned. Initially, he was a little nervous. In terms of combat skills, he was indeed terrible. Coupled with the limitations of the arena, his winning rate was terrifyingly low. To be precise, he hadn't won even once. This was because he needed a lot of time to refine medicine at the beginning of the competition. However, no one would give him such time. When facing him, all his opponents would rush up to him and beat him out of the arena. Therefore, after losing 24 times in a row, Nie Feng gave up on his path to winning in the individual arena. This was because he knew that he wasn't suited for a head-on battle. However, there were rewards for this event. Naturally, Nie Feng wasn't willing to give up just like that, so he decided to try again. However, he didn't expect that his first opponent would be the extremely unconventional group of wall cheaters, Yuan Fang. From the initial nervousness, Nie Feng had become much calmer at this moment. He was going to win for sure. Others were afraid of Yuan Fang because they couldn't break through the upper limit of Yuan Fang's defense. Moreover, they would be hurt instead. Hitting Yuan Fang was like hitting a hedgehog, and they would always be in pain. However, when it came to the upper limit of attack, if Nie Feng said that he was second, who would dare to say that they were first? The explosion at the Mansion of the Dead a year ago was an example. At that time, he had just become an apothecary bomb master, and killed a ghost emperor. Now that he was familiar with it, as long as he was given time, he could blow up anything. Looking at Yuan Fang, Nie Feng's expression gradually turned ferocious, and his heart began to swell. I've finally met an opponent that I can restrain. It seems like I'm going to win for once. As the wall disappeared, the game notification of the start of the competition appeared. At this time, Yuan Fang sat on the ground casually and waved at Nie Feng. Want to sit down and have a chat? Nope. Just wait for your death. Saying that, Nie Feng took out a medicine refining furnace and began to operate it. Seeing this scene, Yuan Fang was stunned. As he didn't go on the forum much and was a player who joined later, he didn't know about Nie Feng's past deeds. Therefore, he was a little confused when he saw Nie Feng refining medicine. Almsgiver, what are you doing? Yuan Fang couldn't help but ask curiously. Give me 20 minutes and then I'll kill you, Nie Feng said without hesitation. From Nie Feng's point of view, so what if he exposed his thoughts? Could Yuan Fang do anything to him? That -1 damage wasn't a threat at all. Just calmly refine medicine and be done with it. Poison? If it's poison, then my current damage reflection can also hurt you. I advise you to give up. A draw is the best result, Yuan Fang couldn't help but advise. No, you'll know later. Be quiet. Saying that, Nie Feng ignored Yuan Fang and continued to refine the special nuclear bomb. It was rare for him to win. At this moment, Nie Feng was inexplicably excited. He had been looking forward to this day for too long. Curious, Yuan Fang walked to Nie Feng's side and began to watch him refine medicine. As time passed, the medicine furnace began to tremble unstably. At this time, players began to enter the spectator area one after another to watch the competition. Regarding the battle between the hackers, many players came with the mentality of learning or watching the excitement. However, when they saw the two competitors standing together and staring at the medicine furnace with a serious expression, the spectators couldn't help but cover their faces. Although everyone was a member of Beiki, can't they compete properly? They're already starting to fake it. I'm going to report this to the dog officials. However, when they saw that Yuan Fang's opponent was Nie Feng, their expressions changed. The explosion at the Mansion of the Dead was a shadow in the hearts of many players. Now that they saw Nie Feng refining medicine, they knew that this competition would not be simple. Looking at Yuan Fang, who was still watching innocently, the spectators couldn't help but cover their faces again. They felt that this Baldy's first failure was coming. Although the casting time of the Bomberman was extremely long, its power was unimaginably great. Back then, the Bomberman had already killed a Ghost Emperor-level powerhouse before everyone had even passed the Ghost Commander trial. Who could withstand such damage? Although the spectators knew that Yuan Fang's defense was impenetrable, he was simply an invincible meat shield with thorns all over his body. However, as the saying went, everything had its vanquisher. To other players, Nie Feng might be a weak player who would only give him free points. However, to Yuan Fang, he was definitely a powerful existence that could subdue him. What a naive little monk. He didn't even know that he was about to die and was watching so seriously. TSK, under the pitying gazes of the players, Yuan Fong was still chattering away with Nie Fong. Nie Fong, on the other hand, ignored him impatiently and continued to craft his special nuclear bomb. Time passed by bit by bit. Soon, 20 minutes had passed. During this period, neither of them suffered any damage. It looked very much like a fake competition. Almsgiver, have you finished refining the medicine? Yuan Fong asked curiously. Nie Fong suddenly raised his head and looked at Yuan Fong with a solemn expression. What's the most beautiful firework you've ever seen? Yuan Fong was a little stunned. He didn't understand what Nie Fong meant. I can guarantee that this will be the most stunning one you've ever seen. Come closer, Nie Fong said as he pointed at the medicine furnace that was shaking non-stop. Yuan Fong heard him and took a step closer out of curiosity. Immediately, cracks appeared on the shaking medicine furnace. Through the cracks, one could see the pitch-black flames burning fiercely inside. The dazzling black light occupied Yuan Fong's vision, and he couldn't help but take a step back. After a brief moment of silence, the alchemy furnace finally exploded. Accompanied by a loud noise, a mushroom cloud rose. The entire arena was shrouded in black light, and everything inside was instantly destroyed. The huge black light lasted for a full minute before slowly dissipating. At this time, Nie Fong stood inside with a smile on his face. Due to the individual arena's protection mechanism, the players' own abilities wouldn't cause damage to themselves. Therefore, no matter how close Yuan Fong was, Nie Fong was unharmed. On the contrary, not a single strand of Yuan Fong's hair was left. It was completely evaporated by the domineering black light. At this moment, many players who followed Yuan Fong to watch the competition couldn't help but applaud. At the same time, they had gloating smiles on their faces. There was no such thing as true invincibility. It was just that they hadn't met their nemesis yet. Bomberman had once again proven that he was the player with the highest damage in the entire server. At this time, a dumbfounded Yuan Fong exited the arena and appeared in the Mansion of the Dead. After opening the activity panel, he was dumbfounded when he saw the personal information on the upper right corner. Individual battle arena details. Yuan Fong wins 1, draws 987, losses 1. At this moment, Yuan Fong didn't even know what happened. At the last moment, he only felt his vision being obscured by the dazzling black light, and then he was out. Thinking of this, he clicked on the combat notification bar, wanting to see the situation at that time. Combat notification. Attacked by a dark explosion, 529,313 damage received, calculated. Damage exceeded defense limit, 514,252 actual damage received, died. Looking at the combat notification bar, Yuan Fong was dumbfounded. 50, more than 500,000 damage. Yuan Fong was completely dumbfounded. Chapter 601. As the event progressed, the Bakey players were having a lot of fun. At around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the third Mid-Autumn Festival event, Gift Giving by Koi, began. At this moment, some of the players with dark expressions were still catching moon rabbits, while others were fiercely competing under the moon. However, most of the players were looking for rivers and lakes to start fishing. The fishing event this time had a chance of catching koi that would receive a mooncake. The players were full of anticipation. The experts in the forum also appeared at this moment, analyzing the event and coming up with several ways to maximize the benefits for the players. For example, forming a team. Since the mooncakes obtained from the gift giving by koi could be gifted to friends and receive 5 points of luck, forming a team would maximize the benefit. For example, if 3 players gifted their mooncakes to each other, each of them would receive 5 points of luck from the lucky draw, and the mooncakes in their hands would not decrease at the same time. The larger the number of people in the team, the easier the distribution would be. After all, even if one could catch a koi, it did not mean that his teammates could too. Therefore, a large number of players began to invite others to form teams to fish for koi in the event channel. However, there was also a group of players who only had a bunch of tricks in their heads. It was impossible for them to do normal activities. He had to do something. Happiness was the only thing that mattered. Not only was Lu Wu dumbfounded by the players' actions, but many other players were also dumbfounded. For example, there was an elementalist who did not use a fishing rod. Instead, he went to the lake to cast a lightning spell to electrocute the fish. Another example was a player who bought explosives made by the bomberman at the auction house and went to the river to blow up the fish. There were all kinds of tricks. This group of players did not follow normal actions at all, they only had the idea of creating trouble. Creating trouble. Creating trouble. Although this group of players had good ideas, they all ended up badly. There were only a few lakes and rivers in Baiki. This group of players stirred up trouble in the water, but it affected the players who were fishing by the shore. By doing so, the koi in the water would be frightened and would not bite the bait at all. Therefore, the indignant players would drag them to the shore and brutally smash their heads. Who asked you to create trouble again? There were actually quite a number of players who wanted to get rich overnight. They felt that fishing in peace was too slow, and that playing tricks was the key to getting rich. They might get rich overnight by doing so. Thus, the fishing party and the players who played tricks gradually became enemies and formed two parties. While fishing, catching rabbits, and competing, there were occasional group fights. Baiki was bustling with activity. Time flew by, and when it was around 8 o'clock at night, most of the players had returned to the mansion of the dead, except for a few players who had been searching for Moon Rabbit the entire day. The final activity, Spend the Full Moon, also began. Game notification. The final event of the Mid-Autumn Festival has begun. Players, please pay attention to the puzzle that appears on the moon. With the appearance of the game notification, the players looked up at the golden full moon hanging in the sky, quietly anticipating. The players were already familiar with the rules of the final event. The players were also familiar with the rules of the final event. Facing the rain and dew, the color of the grass is crisp. Spring comes and summer goes and the grass is as usual. My poetic heart is still there. The wind blows gently in the rain, there are no children by the pine tree, looking at each other from afar, rustling. Hundreds of miles of corpses, mountains crumbled, and the earth was destroyed. After 10,000 years of silence, it finally came into being. As the puzzles appeared on the moon, a translucent answer panel appeared in front of the players. Most of the players were clueless about the answers to the puzzles. They decisively opened the activity channel and called for backup. Lu Wu did not stop them. The event was meant to be fun, so it was normal for them to look for the answers. However, there were only 10 million people who could answer the questions in each round. Whether they could get the prize depended entirely on their hand speed. However, even the answers given by others in the activity channel might not be correct enough. The players would always have different answers, which gave a headache to most of the players who wanted to copy the answers through the activity channel. They could not decide whose answer was better. Some of the players chose to write down the answer of the person they saw first. They could not understand it anyway, so it did not matter. Others relied on guessing the answers, but rookies like us relied on gambling. However, the players did not expect a lantern to appear in front of them after they filled in the answers and chose to submit. The 3 answers were printed on the lantern, and it slowly floated toward the full moon. When it rose into the sky, the lantern with the correct answer would turn into beautiful fireworks and scatter. At this moment, the beautiful fireworks materialized, just like the joy in the players' hearts. The festive atmosphere created by the players once again caused a wave of 666 in the activity channel. Time passed quickly while they were guessing the answers and admiring the moon. During this period, they took out the mooncakes they got from the koi gift-giving event and shared them with each other. The atmosphere was joyful and harmonious, and their faces were filled with happiness from the bottom of their hearts. The fast-paced reality put a lot of people under great pressure, and they no longer attached much importance to the festival. However, here they could enjoy the real joy of the festival and indulge in it. When the clock struck 12, the Mid-Autumn Festival event came to an end, accompanied by a server announcement. The players were reluctant to part. Every time this happened, the players would always think that it would be great if the day could be longer. They had not had enough fun yet. At this moment, the players suddenly realized that the full moon was sprinkling thousands of soft lights again, converging into a bridge that reached the central square of the Mansion of the Dead. I am very grateful for the help from the descendants of Baki. If you don't mind, I would like to dance for you. Hearing this, the players suddenly burst into an uproar. They said that they did not mind, but they did not expect that there would be an Easter egg after the event. At this moment, Chang-Yi's figure slowly rose into the sky as she danced, landing on the bridge formed by the condensed moonlight. She sang an ethereal song that was as lively as water. Her figure danced, and her long sleeves followed. At this moment, her figure gradually disappeared, as if she was bidding farewell to the players. At this moment, many players were stunned. Until the bridge formed by the condensed moonlight dissipated completely, and Chang-Yi also merged into the full moon, the players were still stunned, unable to extricate themselves for a long time. At this moment, no one knew who started it, but the public channel was once again flooded with World Campaign No. 1. As for why the players said World Campaign No. 1, that was the reason. The process of playing the game was more like a different and exciting life. There were happiness and sadness, and there were also many shocks that moved them and made their blood boil. The so-called dog officials were the same. They never treated this game as a commercial product to make money, but instead they considered everything for the players. Apart from being stingy, they were simply the perfect dog officials. Seeing that the players were having so much fun, Lu Wu, who was behind the scenes, could not help but laugh. He had spent a lot of money on today's event, and his stock of soul coins had been depleted. After thinking about it, he felt that it was time for a wave of pay-to-win. Lucky Roulette. Chapter 602. Baki Liuli Coast. The Mid-Autumn Festival event ended, and the players' lives returned to normal. Explorers, navigators, brick-moving players, lifestyle players, and so on. Every player had a different path in the game as they continued their exciting life in the other world. On this day, in the shallow waters of Baki's Liuli Sea, a head slowly surfaced from the bottom of the water. He looked around, first checking the warships and ships docked at the edge of the sea, then looking at the players passing by on the shore. After a moment of contemplation, he began to swim toward the shore. As he neared the shore, his body slowly floated out of the water, the scales on his body reflecting a dazzling radiance under the sun. His body gradually shrunk, and in the blink of an eye, he was in human form, and looked no different from the players. Even if one looked closely, they would not be able to see any flaws. Looking at his own reflection in the water, Oatmeal grinned in satisfaction. In fact, he had been lurking around this area for several days. His purpose here was to help the Netherworld Devour Sea branch investigate the player clan. As for the reason, it was simple. Recently, an extremely important batch of resources was hijacked after being transported to the Kuelong Ocean. The higher-ups of the devouring Netherworld branch were furious and sent a large number of people to investigate the matter. However, the result was obvious. According to the description of the merchants on the merchant ship, the Shark Bite Chamber of Commerce had been blinded by greed. However, another force had appeared afterward, causing the Shark Bite Chamber of Commerce to fall short of success at the last moment. Even their president, Black Shark, had died in the battle. Huang Quan's Devour branch didn't completely believe this and instead carefully investigated the area where the naval battle took place. However, it turned out that the merchants on the merchant ships were not lying. The wreckage of the battleship at the bottom of the sea was proof. At the same time, there were many battleships from the Mu-Te fleet. It was enough to show how intense the battle was. While the higher-ups of the Yellow Springs Devouring Sea branch were shocked by Shark Bite Chamber of Commerce's betrayal, they were also extremely angry. The prestige of the Underworld Merchant Guild was not to be challenged. This was not just a saying. Although the Shark Bite Chamber of Commerce had been destroyed in this battle, there was still one thief who hadn't received the punishment he deserved. Later, in a meeting of the upper echelons of the Chamber of Commerce, someone proposed to annihilate the Player Clan in a thunderous manner, and many agreed. However, at this time, someone stood up and suggested that they should first investigate the Player Clan's background before making a decision. For this reason, he expressed his opinion and convinced everyone in the meeting. First of all, the Player Clan's idea of plundering merchant ships was fundamentally different from the Shark Bite Chamber of Commerce. The Shark Bite Merchant Union had done this secretly and was prepared to erase all clues. He had never thought of becoming enemies with the Netherworld Merchant Union because he didn't dare and knew that the Netherworld Merchant Union was too powerful for him to contend with. However, the Player Clan was very strange. It was practically a robbery on the surface. It was as if they were not worried about being discovered by the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce. Arrogance could no longer be used to describe him. Most importantly, this wasn't the first time this had happened. Previously, the Player Clan had done the same and successfully overturned the War Chamber of Commerce, Smoke Dragon. Therefore, in his opinion, there might be some unspeakable conspiracy behind the repeated provocations. In order to convince everyone present, this person even took out a piece of information that he had recently obtained from an investigation. From this, he learned that the Player Clan was not a sea power. Their main power was rooted on land, and they had only recently joined the struggle for supremacy in the sea. Although the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce was very powerful in the sea, their control over the land was very limited. Therefore, before exterminating the Player Clan, it was best to investigate it thoroughly. His reasoning convinced everyone present. After listening to his analysis, the upper echelons of the Chamber of Commerce also felt that the Player Clan was indeed as strange as what this person had said. It had been a long time since a power dared to openly challenge the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce. Therefore, they subconsciously thought that the Player Clan must have someone backing them to be so fearless. This was because the forces that dared to challenge the ruling position of the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce were the same. They were either extremely powerful themselves or had the support of other superpowers. However, in the end, none of them succeeded. The Netherworld Chamber of Commerce's dynasty was still stable. After making the decision, Huang went to the Chamber of Commerce to find the Illusion Fish Clan, a very famous bounty team in the Devouring Sea. He gave them a batch of resources as remuneration and asked them to secretly investigate the Player Clan. As this was a commission from the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce, the Illusion Fish Clan attached great importance to it. Although the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce had never interfered in the power struggle of the major sea regions and focused all their attention on the struggle of the Central Sea region. However, the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce controlled the trade of all the sea regions. Their powerful strength was unquestionable. Therefore, the Illusion Fish Clan did not dare to be negligent. They immediately sent Yen Mai, who had the most potential and was the most likely to become the next clan leader, to investigate this matter. After a few days of observation, Yen Mai had confirmed the appearance and characteristics of the Player Clan. He was finally ready to take action. After successfully transforming, Yen Mai arrived at the Liuli coast. He then walked toward the land of Baki. His current goal was to go to the central main city of the Player Clan, which was the Mansion of the Dead. Basically, one could tell the exact strength of a force by looking at the central main city of the force. Yen Mai was very experienced in this. As he walked along the way, it was just as he expected. With the help of the racial talent transformation, although he encountered many players along the way who were walking toward the Liuli coast, no one noticed anything different about him. They just brushed past each other. Yenmai was a little nervous at first, but he soon relaxed. At this moment, Yenmai was very proud of himself. With the help of the racial talent, he had completed the previous infiltration missions with ease. He was not discovered until the end. He felt that it would be the same this time. There was no problem at all. With a joyful mood, Yenmai kept walking toward the mansion of the dead. As for where the mansion of the dead was, there was no need to ask for directions. With so many players coming from that direction, it was obvious at a glance. As the number of players he encountered increased, Yenmai was sure that his disguise was impeccable. Moreover, he did not need to steal anything from the main city of the player clan for this investigation. He also did not need to get in touch with the higher-ups of the player clan. All he needed to do was to walk around the main city and roughly assess the strength of the player clan. With this layer of disguise, the difficulty of such a mission was too easy for him. But soon, he did not think so. This was because he did not expect that the players had an almost bug-level ability, analysis. Although the players would not use this ability on other players without special circumstances, there were always exceptions. There was such a group of players who liked to go around and check the information of other players' equipment. They would record and calculate some things, then make it into a guide and post it on the forum. On the way to the mansion of the dead, Yenmai happened to meet such a player who was collecting data along the way. When he saw Yenmai, the player's expression gradually became very interesting. However, after discovering that Yenmai's strength had reached the peak of the Ghost King realm, he did not attack. Instead, he took a few screenshots and posted them on the forum to gain some popularity. At this time, in the forum, a post made by a player attracted the attention of many people. I met a player on the way just now. I subconsciously opened an analysis to see the information. Guess what I found? Laughing emoji. Original poster. The little hunter who caught broken teeth content. 1,000 words omitted. Attached pictures x3 Yenmai Ghost King Peak. Character details. Member of the Phantom Fish Bounty Group, the top force in the Devouring Sea, a strong competitor for the next clan leader of the Phantom Fish clan. Proficient in the clan's innate ability, transmogrify. Has completed several missions that were considered impossible by the outside world, and is known as the most promising successor of the new generation of the Phantom Fish clan. Character status. Normal. Seeing this post, the players on the forum were suddenly in a heated discussion. Not only were the players not afraid of the arrival of such an intruder, but they were also a little excited. Watermelon_Taro. Come. Let's bet on the purpose of this person's visit. Bet that he's here for sightseeing. 110. It's time to make money. Hurry up and place your soul coins. Laughing emoji. Shirley_the_strongest. Do you want to give him a surprise? I'm in the city now. How about I go out and stab him in the back? Laughing emoji. Assassin_Creed. Upstairs, please bring a team of assassins and sneak over, then jump out together to scare him to death. Laughing emoji. Peppa_Boar. Hurry up and make arrangements for him. This guy has bad intentions. He's definitely here to cause trouble. Crayon_Shinchan. It's so boring to kill him directly. Let him enter the city. Since he's transmogrified, there's no doubt that he's a spy. So let him enter the city. When the time comes, close the door and let him struggle inside. We'll surround him when he thinks that he's got the information he wants and that his mission has been completed. Then, we'll give him a surprise, then we'll make him despair and deal a mental blow. Laughing emoji. A_large_wolfdog replied to Crayon_Shinchan. Shameless, too shameless. Crayon_Shinchan replied to A_large_wolfdog, patting the dog's head with a smile. We're talking among the player clan. Why are you butting in? Have you forgotten what race you're from after spending so much time with the player clan? Neptune's Twitter. JPG, 2_tigers. Interesting. Quick, let him enter the city. I want to see what this guy is up to. Expectant eyes. JPG. As the players discussed, more and more players learned that such a spy was approaching the mansion of the dead. At this moment, the players were discussing how to give this spy a big surprise. Oates, who was still walking toward the mansion of the dead, had no idea that he had been clearly arranged by the players before he even reached his destination. As he walked, Oates suddenly felt that something was wrong, because many players who passed by would steal a glance at him, and then an inexplicable smile would appear on their faces. Oates was sure that this was not the custom and characteristic of the player clan, because the player clan members he met on the way before weren't like this, and many of them didn't even look at him. At this moment, he inexplicably felt a little strange. Oates didn't think that he had exposed himself, because until now, he hadn't communicated with any players. From the outside, he looked like a normal player, and he was full of confidence in his ability to disguise himself. Back then, even a late-stage Ghost Emperor powerhouse couldn't see through his disguise, let alone the player clan. However, there was something that Oates didn't know. These passing players were purely driven by curiosity to rush over from the mansion of the dead. They just wanted to take a closer look at him. Their mentality was like watching a monkey. Chapter 603. While Yen Mai was on his way to the mansion of the dead, the player's original plan to prank him had suddenly changed. The reason was that the players near the Kuelong Ocean had sent a message. The Sea King had found them and informed them of a piece of news. The Sea King had now become the player's spy in the Underworld Merchant Guild. According to the Sea King's description, a force was about to arrive in Baiki. And their purpose was to investigate the player clan's background and inform the Underworld Chamber of Commerce of the situation. At the same time, the Sea King gave the players a solution. Because killing this person was completely insignificant to the Underworld Merchant Guild. Therefore, the most important thing was to frighten this person and mislead him into thinking that the player clan was extremely powerful so that they could bring the fake news back. So that the Underworld Merchant Guild would not dare to cause trouble for a short period of time. After all, the Underworld Merchant Guild that devoured the sea was only a branch. Other than the few higher-ups, the strongest was the War Merchant Guild. Therefore, if they encountered a particularly powerful force, they could only seek help from the Central Sea and would not dare to take the initiative to attack. However, what the Sea King did not know was that Yen Mai had already arrived at the Mansion of the Dead. However, the players in the Kuelong Ocean instantly conveyed the information provided by the Sea King to the players in the Mansion of the Dead by relying on the super long-distance, real-time communication function. At this moment, the players who were ready to kill Yen Mai decided to change their plan and play something else. After a 3-hour journey, Yen Mai realized that the surrounding environment had changed drastically as he approached the Mansion of the Dead. Along the way, there were osmanthus trees planted everywhere and the fragrance of the place filled his nose. Looking up into the distance, a tall and majestic city stood in the distance. It was rare to see a city of this scale above the sea. Moreover, in the underworld where wars were frequent, it was normal for cities to be occupied or plundered. Basically, no force would spend a lot of effort to build a city. Based on his preconceived notions, Yen Mai felt that the player clan must have a strong foundation. As he approached the gate of the Mansion of the Dead, Yen Mai stopped and began to observe the players entering the city. He had to be careful. If the player clan needed to be inspected or provided with something before entering the city, he could easily expose himself if he did not investigate in advance. After checking and confirming that the players did not need to go through any procedures to enter the city, Yen Mai plucked up his courage and walked toward the gate of the Mansion of the Dead. When he arrived at the gate, he glanced around and followed behind a few players who were walking into the city with a calm expression. However, what he did not know was that the players in front of him were already chatting in the live chat channel. "Is that the idiot behind you? You're quite good at acting. If it wasn't for analysis, I wouldn't have been able to discover him. His disguise is indeed very good. Ha ha ha, looking forward to his performance. The bait has taken the bait. He's a ghost king after all. Everyone, don't laugh so arrogantly. Give him some face, ha ha. After following these players into the city, Yen Mai was shocked by the prosperity before him. He had never seen such a bustling city in his life. The jade-paved road was bustling with people, and the buildings on both sides were beautifully decorated. In the distance there were fountains and neon lights. Oates found all of this unbelievable. The maritime kingdoms he had seen on the islands had never been so prosperous. Even though this underworld city was built on land, Yen Mai still found it somewhat inconceivable. Could it be that this city had never experienced war before? If it wasn't for the long-term development, Oates didn't believe that the city could have developed to this extent. Just as Yen Mai was feeling puzzled, he suddenly heard two people whispering in front of him. He immediately took 2 steps forward and pricked up his ears to eavesdrop. Oh yes, it seems like Chairman Lu slaughtered a god yesterday. He's now left in the east square of the city. Should we go take a look? Sure, let's go take a look. Speaking of which, this is Chairman Lu's 8th time slaughtering a god. That's really impressive. I wonder when we'll be able to reach this level of strength. Looking at the 2 players gradually walking away, Yen Mai was dumbfounded. Slaughtering a god? The 8th time? Did he think he was slaughtering a chicken? At this moment, Yen Mai was stunned. Obviously, he couldn't accept the arrogant words of the 2 players casually saying that they had slaughtered a god. God-level powerhouses were almost invincible even in the sea. Even the sea spirits mostly had the strength of a demigod. Once they broke through, they would leave the sea and head for the Central Sea. In other words, other than the Central Sea of the underworld, God-level powerhouses represented almost invincible in all the major seas. Hearing these words, Yen Mai felt like he had been dealt a heavy blow. Refusing to believe it, he immediately followed behind the 2 players and walked toward the east square of the underworld. Although Yen Mai was shocked by the prosperity along the way, he wanted to know whether the 2 players' claim of slaughtering a god was true or not. Or rather, the god that they mentioned was just a name and not a real god. But soon, he would know whether it was true or not. Following the 2 players to the south square of the city, he saw the enormous body of the demonic god that was as huge as a mountain. At this moment, the demonic god was covered in wounds and looked extremely weak. He lay motionless on the ground. Seeing this, Yen Mai was completely dumbfounded. Previously, he was still guessing whether the gods were real or not. But the moment he saw the demonic god, his doubts disappeared. At this moment, the demonic god exuded a vast aura, and the shining god's seal on his forehead proved that he was a god on the underworld god list. This is AF * King God. At this moment, Yen Mai felt that the player clan was not just powerful. They were so powerful that it was suffocating. Actually, he had never underestimated the player clan. The reason was simple. Because this was a mission sent by the Underworld Trade Union. If they were a weak force, they would have been destroyed long ago. Why would they need to investigate personally? But he did not expect the player clan to have a powerhouse that could kill a god. Although the Underworld Trade Union also had such a powerhouse, such powerhouses only existed in the Central Sea region and not in the other large seas. This was also the first time he had seen a god-level powerhouse that was seriously injured. Even standing in front of him, the vast aura caused Yen Mai's body to tremble uncontrollably. It was as if a sea of blood had appeared in front of him, and he had turned into a duckweed, swaying in the waves of blood. It was as if he would be crushed by the huge waves at any time. While he was extremely shocked, Yen Mai felt uneasy and fear rose in his heart. At this moment, he had a guess. The player clan was such a powerful force. Now that they dared to challenge the Underworld Trade Union, did that mean that they had the intention to overthrow the Underworld Trade Union and replace it? At this moment, he had come to investigate on the side of the Underworld Trade Union. If he was discovered, the consequences would be dire. Trying to survive in the middle of two great forces would only result in being completely crushed and the destruction of his clan. The more he thought about it, the more afraid he became. Taking a deep breath, Yenmai turned around and walked towards the city gate. He could not stay here any longer. Before coming here, he had thought that it would be a good job, but he did not expect it to be a hot potato. Seeing such a terrifying truth with his own eyes, Yenmai was extremely anxious. If the clan was involved in the war, the consequences would be unimaginable. He had to inform the clan leader of this news first. If a war really broke out between the player clan and the underworld trade union, he could only hope that the Illusion Fish clan would stand in a neutral position and hide far away. They could not be involved, and they could not be misunderstood as siding with the underworld trade union. It would be fine if the player clan was weak. However, it was proven that the player clan was not weak, but terrifyingly powerful. How could he watch the Illusion Fish clan be destroyed because of this? He had to go back as soon as possible. On the way back, Yenmai suddenly stopped in his tracks. Not far away, a person walked by. This person was holding a jug of wine in each hand, taking 2 sips with every step he took. Yenmai had not seen this person with his own eyes, but he was extremely familiar with his appearance. It was a portrait that hung in the clan's ancestral worship hall all year round. Every day, he would be led by the clan elder to kowtow to it. How could he not be familiar with it? At this moment, the first thought in Yenmai's mind was, "Fake, it's definitely fake. He died a long time ago. It's just his appearance. Don't be afraid." At this moment, Haiyu, who was shopping, suddenly turned around and looked at Yenmai, causing him to tremble in fear. A member of the Illusion Fish clan. Hearing the woman in front of him call out his origin, Yenmai was almost scared to tears. He had clearly disguised himself so well. How did she see through him at a glance? Thinking of this, he hurriedly turned his head to look around. Fortunately, no players noticed him. At this moment, Haiyu took 2 steps forward and stared at him with her drunken eyes. "Is your clan leader, Phantom Thorn, still alive?" This sentence scared Yenmai again. Could it be that his guess was right? Phantom Thorn was the ancestor of the Illusion Fish clan. He had been dead for many years. Yenmai only knew about this ancestor from listening to the clan elders talking about the clan's history. Back then, the ancestor, Phantom Thorn, followed the woman in the portrait in the ancestral worship hall. Could this woman before him really be the Empress, the overlord of the Nethersea nation? An absurd possibility surfaced in Yenmai's mind. In Yenmai's opinion, the legendary Empress had been dead for countless years. Perhaps her corpse had rotted away. How could she still exist? "You are?" Yenmai asked in a soft voice. "Your ancestor, Phantom Thorn, once followed me." The words were shocking. Even though Yenmai had mentally prepared himself, he was still stunned when he heard this. "Since you are the descendant of an acquaintance, hurry up and leave. Don't expose your identity. Why are you here?" Yenmai couldn't help but ask. "Hurry up and leave. I can't save you if you're discovered. Even your clan will be implicated." Haiyu glared at him. Panicking, Yenmai hurriedly nodded and quickly walked out of the city. At this moment, Yenmai had no intention of continuing his investigation. He only wanted to return to the clan as soon as possible and inform them of the news. If possible, he might as well evacuate the entire clan from the devouring sea to avoid being implicated. However, when he reached the city gate, he stopped again. At this moment, a man clad in armor stood on top of the city gate. Outside the city gate were thousands of player clan members kneeling. "You've violated the clan rules. Die." As the man roared, he threw a punch downward. In Yenmai's opinion, this punch was weak and did not have any lethality at all. But soon, he didn't think so. The thousands of players below did not even have the time to scream before they were shattered into black mist and dissipated with the wind. It was as if they had never existed. Seeing this scene, Yenmai was stunned on the spot. At this moment, Lu Chai, who was standing on top of the city gate, turned his head to look at Yen Mai. President Lu, give me a boxed meal and a chicken drumstick. Realizing that Lu Chai was looking at him, Yen Mai was so scared that he almost cried. This place is too scary. I'm scared to death. I'm still young. I don't want to die.